everyone to the, yeah, thank you, Michelle. Sorry for the not giving you the heads up there. I want to welcome everyone to the October 19th, 2021 monthly board meeting for the Menlo Park Fire Protection District Board of Directors. Michelle, would you call the roll?
Director Bernstein, I do not see on yet. Director Jones?
Here.
Director Crawley?
Present.
Director Solana?
Here.
Director McLaughlin?
Here. Great, thank you. Would you please stand and join me for the pledge to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the
To
flag
the flag
Of
of the United States
States of America.
of America,
The
of the
Republic
republic
for
for which
which
it stands, one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
liberty,
with liberty
liberty and
and
justice for
justice for
all.
all.
Thank you. Michelle, is there any public comment?
I wanted to have a moment to get Director Bernstein on. He's having trouble. So if we can have a moment to get him on.
Sure.
Just made it, huh?
Yes, made it. Are you on silent?
No. I'm gonna take it outside, okay? So you guys can talk. All right. You see movement, I'm going outside, Jim.
All right.
Director Bernstein is on and I promoted him to panelist. So we should be good. If there's any member of the public who would like to give public comment, please raise your hand or hit *9 on your phone. And I do not see any public comments.
All right. Well, thank you. Well, Chief Schaefer is on vacation, and in his absence, Chief Navarro is acting chief and will be fulfilling that role this evening. The first item is the report, the fire chief's report. So Manny, I see Chief Navarro's name, but
Forgive me, I'm not sure why the camera's not working. It was working yesterday. I can't seem to begin and out, but I'm here.
all right.
And so, good evening, directors. Chief Schaefer is on a well-deserved vacation and asked me if I just step in for the week. We did consult last week. He did put together a chief's report, and that report is before you now. There's really only a couple items that he had indicated on the report. And the first one is the holiday office closure. And as you can read, the administrative offices will be closed from Friday, December the 24th through Sunday, January the 2nd. Because of the operational aspects of the fire department, those people that are in town normally are listening anyway, even though we may not be at the office. Certainly we don't close the fire department, it just would be the administrative services. The second thing on the chief's report, Government Finance Officers Association Award. And I'm pleased to announce that the Government Finance Officers Association and GFOA has reviewed the district's FY 2020 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, the CAFR, and has awarded that district GFOA Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting for its fiscal year 2020. This is something to be admired. It's the 11th straight year the district has earned this award. Congratulations to our finance staff. They certainly have done some admirable work on managing that. And of course, part of that too is the oversight of the board and our committees. And with that, I'll take any questions, but that's the chief's report.
Chief Navarro, I'd like to just recognize the hard work of all the the people that put that report together, and please extend my kudos to everyone involved.
Yes, it was.
I'll make sure that I pass that on to the finance staff. We'll see you tomorrow. I'll let everybody know. And Long Lamb actually is probably listening on the meeting tonight. thanks to Long and the rest of the staff there on putting that together.
Yes, thanks, Manny, for that. I, again, would love you to extend our congratulations. I mean, this is a big deal, and it just shows that financially, we're very sound, and that the board has been watching over the finances carefully, and the staff also, and that we, care about how tax dollars are spent.
All right, any other questions for Chief Navarro?
Jim, Rob?
Rob?
Yeah, Chief Navarro, as everyone else has, please extend our sincere gratitude to the finance staff. Thank you.
We certainly will. I think, like I said, it's I've dealt with budgets for many, many years. It's nice to have a very competent staff. And I think the board is fully recognized that the reports that come forward are fairly comprehensive, and they're really obligated to do things by the book, but not only by professional standards, but State Controller's Office also has authority over our special districts in terms of budget. So we're meeting all our obligations, both on the state side of that, legal obligations, but in addition to that, of course, the professional standards. And I looked at them carefully because I had to do the accreditation, and that's one of the things in accreditation they ask for the CAPRs, and they actually will exempt us from responding on several of the categories if we have the report and we have a certificate. So they've made my job a little easier too on accreditation.
Wow,
I'll pass it on.
it's exceptional.
Chuck?
Jim, I wanted to go back, I'm sorry, to the fire chief's report. We had the dates that the headquarters is closed and so forth. I wonder if Manny, you may not know this or whatever, but can you tell us, what does the staff do if they're supposed to work, but the headquarters is closed? Is that extra holiday, or do they take paid time off, or how does that work?
Basically, what we've done in the past is they take PTO.
I see.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, that brings us to the consent calendar. There's 5 items on it. Is anyone interested in pulling anything off?
Jim?
Rob?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to accept the consent calendar.
I'll second that.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any discussion? All right, Michelle, would you please call the vote?
Ask for public comment really quick. If there's anybody that would like to provide public comment, please raise your hand or hit *9 on your phone. And I see none. Director Bernstein,
Aye.
Director Jones,
Aye,
Director Crawley,
Aye.
Director Solano,
Aye.
Director McLaughlin.
Aye. All right. Moving on to the regular agenda. The first item is approve a resolution for continued remote meetings in accordance with Assembly Bill 361. Stephen, I think you wrote the analysis on that. Could you address that? We don't hear you, Stephen. No, we still don't hear you.
can hear you, Steve.
I see your 415 telephone number displayed, Stephen, but there's a slash through the audio.
There we go. I think that
There we
should
go.
work.
That works.
Apologies for that. For some reason, my audio is an attendee while my video is a panelist for this meeting. I don't quite understand what I did wrong, but anyway, good evening. You all have a report in your packet from me about AB 361, and I previously advised you that the recently enacted law amends the Brown Act such that this board may meet remotely without compliance with some of the traditional Brown Act requirements for teleconference meetings, so long as the board makes specified findings every 30 days. And one of those findings, and as indicated in the staff report, requires confirmation that state and local officials continue to recommend social distancing measures. And I can tell you that that is still the case. The California Department of Health, Department of Industrial Relations, San Mateo County Board of Supervisors are all recommending physical distancing under certain circumstances. And as such, I recommend that you adopt the resolution that accompanies the board report at each meeting until you determine that it's appropriate for the district board and the public to meet together in person. And with that, I'm happy to answer any specific questions. That's my report.
So are you saying,
Robert?
so Steve, are you saying that every month we have to put together a resolution or just agendize the item and vote up or down?
So under AB 361, every month you must make findings and vote by a majority to adopt those findings. And the resolution that you see before you does just that. And so it will be this resolution that's before you every month for so long as you wish to continue to meet remotely.
Chuck?
I wanted to ask Stephen if we can put this item on the consent calendar in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't want to take the liberty of doing that, in particular since you're making findings, but yes is the answer to your question.
Thank you.
All right, very good. If there's nothing further, is there a motion on this item?
I'll make a motion, Jim.
Okay,
I'll move, you want me to just move? I'll move to adopt and approve.
well, I think Rob,
Oh, I couldn't hear Rob.
yeah, Rob's made the motion. So Stephen, as
Well,
I
what's the
understand,
motion?
the motion would be that our next meeting be held via
No.
Zoom.
The motion is to adopt a resolution that is in your packet,
Yeah,
which it finds that the factors triggering the state of emergency regarding COVID-19 continue to directly impact the district's ability to meet in person, and that state or local officials continue to recommend measures to promote social distancing.
yes, which is basically Assembly Bill 361. Is that correct, Steve?
So those are the findings that are required by AB 361 if you wish
Yes.
to continue to meet remotely.
Yes.
Stephen, do we need to make reference to our next scheduled meeting, or that's not necessary?
That is not necessary. This motion, this resolution will be before you at every meeting until you decide that you no longer wish to meet remotely. So
All right.
the answer to your question is no. Just all you need to do is to make a motion to approve the resolution and then actually approve the resolution if that's the will of the board.
Okay, Rob, do you want to make that motion?
Yes, I do, but I also want to add what Chuck has suggested, that it be put on our consent agenda every month.
Okay. And Robert, I saw your hand. I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, that's okay. I was just trying to get clarification is that the actual approval is what's stated on the agenda item number 7 in the staff report. Is that the exact motion?
Correct.
Okay, so there it is.
All right, so does Rob need to be more explicit with his motion, or is that satisfactory?
Satisfactory.
Okay, very good. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, any discussion? All right, Michelle, would you call the vote, please?
I'll ask for public comment first. If there's
I'm
any
sorry.
public comment, please raise your hand or hit star 9 on your phone. And I see none. Director Bernstein,
Aye.
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Corrali,
Aye.
Director Solano,
Aye.
Director McLaughlin.
Aye. All right, that brings us to the next item, number 8. Adopt a resolution to approve a contract amendment between the Board of Administration, the California Public Employees Retirement System, and the Board of Directors for the Menlo Park Fire Protection District. Francine, I believe you prepared this. So
Yes.
Robert,
Yeah,
Robert, did you have a comment?
yeah, I don't know if we actually, or maybe we did, take up the proposed idea that Chuck brought up in terms of having this as part of our consent calendar. I don't know if we need to make a vote on it or by the whole board, or if just making that so it's just going to happen.
I think Rob mentioned that in his motion. Stephen, do you?
Yes, I did, Jim. Robert, yeah,
That's
I
that's
edited
my
at the end.
understanding. That's my understanding as well. So I would imagine that Michelle and the chief will put this on consent, and then of course, the board will have the opportunity to remove it if they wish to.
Oh, okay.
All right, very good. Right, Francine, I believe you did the analysis on item 8. If you could address that, please.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Board of Directors. So this staff report before you is the second step in the process to approve a contract amendment with CalPERS. And just to kind of give you a background, this benefit, which is called the Post-Retirement Survivor Allowance, was approved in the MOU when the group formed in 2008 and has been included in every MOU. But the step of amending our CalPERS contract amendment to include this benefit was not taken by the district. So what we're trying to do here is make the unit whole with this benefit that was approved by a prior board of directors. So I prepared the resolution of intention and brought that before the board on June, I believe it was 24th, for approval. The board approved the resolution of intention, and this is the second step in the process to approve the final contract amendment. So it's not a new item that ASME is negotiating for. It's something that was included in their contract that was never I guess the CalPERS contract was never amended to include. So now I'm bringing this forward to the board to approve the final resolution so that we can have this benefit effective November 1st, which would be the first full pay period following board approval. Questions?
Are there any questions for Francine on this item? Francine, I just have one. So
Sure.
if the board approves this evening, is there another step in this process, or is this the last step for the board?
So this is the last step moving forward with CalPERS, but we're still working, in parallel with Bartell to figure out what to do for prior years that weren't covered under the CalPERS contract. So this is, CalPERS won't a retroactive a benefit. And so they will only do a prospective amendment. So we still are working on that part, but this will make everyone whole from this point forward for this benefit.
Yeah, I was specific, and I should have been more specific. This is the last step to creating the contract with CalPERS.
Yes, that's correct. And in your attachment, I know there's lots of attachments to the staff report, but there is the amended contract in there that has the section that lists for miscellaneous employees.
All right. Robert?
Francine, I noticed on the physical impact, you had some numbers in there, and one of them sticks out about 163,000. Is that for past or moving forward?
So that's so the way the actuarial works is they look at our current employee population in the groups, and they project the cost for the life of the plan. So that is for the life of this benefit based on all of our current employees, whether they're Pepper or Classic, their life expectancy, their current age. That's the cost for the life of this benefit.
For the current employees?
For the current employees, yes. Questions?
All right, is there a motion relative to this item?
I'd like to make the motion then, Jim.
We have public comment.
I'm sorry, there's someone wishes. Yeah, I do see a hand raised. Michelle, could you bring that person in or identify that person?
Hi, good evening, directors. This is Amy Kraska. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I just want to make sure that it's clear, and I think Francine did cover it further on in her discussion, that although we brought it to the attention of the board, this actually applies to all miscellaneous employees. So even though it's been in the AFSCME contract since 2008, it does not only apply to the staff of AFSCME, it applies to all miscellaneous employees. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. Is
And
there
then
any-
sorry, just to add on what Amy said, it does mention that it is for miscellaneous. In addition to being identified in the AFSCME MOU, it was also identified in the miscellaneous compensation plan that this was a benefit for miscellaneous employees. And that was a 2008 comp plan.
All right, I believe, is there any further public comment, Michelle?
Public comment, please raise your hand or hit *9 if you called in. And I see none.
All right, Rob, I believe you wanted to make a motion.
Yes, I make a motion to adopt a resolution to approve a contract amendment between the Board of Administration, California Public Employees Retirement System, and the Board of Directors, Menlo Park Fire Protection District.
I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion? Chuck?
Yes, I just wanted to explain why I'm going to vote against this. There's no question that we owe a benefit to these, what were the administrative employees as of 1993, and we did not fulfill that commitment, and we should fulfill that commitment. I'm not happy that we didn't investigate this a little bit further. A lot has changed in 30 years. This is a benefit that is primarily designed for men, not women, just given the demographics of survival. And I think it offers virtually, no benefit or very little benefit to our employees. And I wish we could have looked at that. The second concern I have is that it's one more thing that we're adding that involves CalPERS, which in my opinion is a virtually corrupt organization, kind of ex-political appointed people who make decisions for political reasons. And CalPERS has been notorious in its failure to perform. And I would like to have as little to do with them as possible. So for those reasons, and when I vote no, I'm going to request that my vote reflect the fact that I think this is a benefit for men primarily, and also the problems with CalPERS as an explanation for my no vote. Anyway, I just wanted to make that statement. Thank you.
All right. Anything further? Is there any further public comment, Michelle?
If there are further public comments, please raise your hand now or hit *9 on your phone. And I see none.
All right, would you please call the vote?
Director Bernstein,
Nay, and I request that the minutes reflect my comments about why I voted no.
Director Jones,
Yes.
Director Crawley,
Aye.
Director Solano,
Aye.
Director McLaughlin.
Aye.
Thank you.
Moving on to number 10, we have a resolution before us to authorize the sole source purchase of 2 Stryker chest compression systems in an amount not to exceed 32,000. Chief Navarro, do you want to handle that one, or?
Melanie may be on, but quite frankly, I think this is very straightforward. Looking at the analytics year for year, which I've had to do, 65% of all our responses are EMS or medical. And some of the most critical responses that we will undertake are cardiac related. So both of these pieces of equipment, both the LifePak 15 and the chest compression systems, are part of that same system when we have a cardiac arrest and what we do. The LifePak itself is what is used in the county. We're under the LEMSA, which basically dictates the type of protocol and the equipment we use. And this is what's been used in the county. We have, through our JPA, some of those defibrillators are actually purchased for us, but we outfit every one of our engine companies and truck companies with paramedics, and we give them full pharmaceuticals and a full set of equipment. This will bring up our inventory so that we have additional equipment on every rig, but also we have some for training, and we don't have to take something off a rig just to do training. And if something fails in one, we have one in reserve. So the reason it's sole source is because that's what all the rest of the equipment is using. One is the LEMSA says that's what we're going to be using, but secondly, we wouldn't want to have 2 different types of devices and train our paramedics in 2 different ways. So I would recommend that the board pass both of these.
Thank you, Chuck.
Yes, I just want to add to that, that the real issue here is the sole source aspect of it. And I did, at the finance committee meeting, I did inquire about that. The company that makes both the defibrillator and the chest compression system has its own sales force. They do not use separate sales distributors or dealers or anything. So there really is no other way to purchase this equipment without buying it from the company sole source.
Thank you, Director. That's accurate.
Yeah, thank you for that. You know, I'll just make a comment. I learned about this equipment when we were doing the JPA contract, and you know, learned of its value, and I'm very pleased that we're providing a higher level of service in this area than many of our fellow agencies. So any other questions for Chief Navarro or comments?
I'm sorry.
Chuck?
Yeah, I do have one more positive in support of this, and that is that I was concerned, as you said, Jim, other agencies are not necessarily using this. And I was concerned that we were providing it for our neighboring jurisdictions when our firefighters went to their jurisdiction. But when neighboring jurisdictions came into our district, that they wouldn't have this equipment. And I was assured that all of the immediate neighboring fire agencies do have this equipment, so that we'll be able to benefit from our neighbors when they come into our district.
Well, as a resident over 60, I am very pleased to hear that. All right, Michelle, any public comment?
Public comments, please raise your hand or hit *9. And I see none. No public comments.
All right, would you please call the vote?
Yes. Director Bernstein?
Excuse me, Director McLaughlin, excuse me.
Yes, sir.
There are 2 items that have sort of been introduced both together. There are in your packet 2 separate resolutions, and there's not been a motion or a second to adopt either of them. It might be prudent just take an extra 30 seconds to go through each one separately, if that's okay.
Thank you for that. Is there, if I understand you correctly, Stephen, we need a motion for each item?
I think that would be helpful, yes.
Okay, very good.
For
Is
number
there a
9
motion?
and for number 10.
We're only on, I'm sorry, wait, we're only on number 9 right now. Number 10 is a separate item, so we just need a We just need a motion for agenda item number 9.
Okay, Jim, I'll approve a resolution authorizing the sole source purchase of one Stryker Life Pack 15 defibrillator in an amount not to exceed $55,000.
I'll second it.
Been moved and seconded. Any public comment?
We have no public comment. Thank you.
All right, would you please call a vote?
Director Bernstein,
Aye.
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Crawley,
Aye.
Director Solano,
Aye.
Director McLaughlin.
Aye. That brings us to 10, which is the purchase of the chest compression device for an amount not to exceed $32,000. Chief Navarro, I don't know if you have any further comments.
No, it's pretty straightforward, and Director Bernstein is well informed, and so is Director McLaughlin. I think you're assured you're going to get a good quality equipment for our paramedics. Thank you.
All right, very good.
Jim, I'd like to make a motion. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was gonna make a motion.
You know, I saw Chuck's hand first.
Oh,
Okay, well, I'll make the motion.
Fine item here.
All right,
I'll make a motion to approve the sole source purchase of the chest compression system.
I'll second.
moved and seconded. Any further comments? Any public comment, Michelle?
Please raise your hand or hit *9. And I see none.
Okay, please call the vote.
Director Bernstein,
Aye.
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Crawley,
Aye.
Director Solano,
Aye.
Director McLaughlin.
Aye. All right, that brings us to item 11, which is the fiscal year 2021 year-end report and a recommendation to adopt a resolution authorizing amendments to the fiscal year 2021 and fiscal year 21-22 budgets and allocation of funds for fiscal year 20 and 21. You know, I see Long Lam is on with us. I just want to ask if Chief Navarro, if you have any comments, and then Chuck is chair of the Finance Committee. Do you have any comments before we hear from Long?
No, I would just tee up that there was a vigorous discussion at the Finance Committee relative to the report. There are a number of moving parts that really were noted, especially by Director Bernstein, in terms of like, for example, overtime. But what you're going to find out is we have basically taken that and developed a very definitive sheet that explains all those changes. And in summary, we went through COVID, where we shut down a bunch of different things. One, for example, is that because of COVID, we shut down PTO, which is the time off to take. And then it came back roaring back in again. We did some things with the battalion chiefs. We had them on training positions, which we had to backfill, and then we moved them forward. We had a number of pretty significant deployments, much so in that particular given year. And so the numbers that you see that are a change from year to year look fairly dramatic, but they're all very well explained. Director Bernstein brought up the issue, and we met yesterday and again today. Long Lam actually put together a nice spreadsheet for it, and we can have that available next time we have a Finance Committee meeting and dig into it. I'm very satisfied with what I saw today and the conversations that we had relative to these issues. And with that, if you have any questions, Long Lam's on the line. I also have Dan Coyle was kind of hanging around on the operations side of it. We'll feed in, field any questions you might have.
Right. You know, Long, before we hear from you, I just, Chuck, do you have any comments, you know, before Long begins his discussion?
Just one really, or actually two. The first one is that I have long felt that this idea of adjusting the budget after the year is over is kind of a silly exercise, because if you know what the actual is, you can always have a budget that is exactly what your actual is, and you come in right on the budget. However, when last meeting we had, we talked to our auditor. Actually, it was the finance committee meeting. I asked the auditor about this, and the auditor said this was common practice for public sector entities. So it doesn't seem like we're doing something unusual, but I'll still maintain that it's an exercise that doesn't really make any sense to me. The other observation, I did bring up the overtime because it was up 70% from the year prior. And by all accounts, I haven't seen the science on this, but I appreciate that the district staff has taken the lead in looking into it and so forth. It seemed like our calls for service were down. And given that our calls were down, it would seem that our overtime would possibly be down also. But I think it merits more study, because it's a huge amount of money. That is, the overage here is a huge amount of money. It's shown on page 88, by the way, of the report, in the middle of the page there in that chart. Yeah, page 88 of our packet, or page 7 of 16 in the report itself. And we're looking at, so for $7 million in overtime and so forth. I mean, it just, oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong number.
Page 68.
Is it 68? I'm sorry, the number is so small.
68.
You're right, I said 88. I apologize. 68 is right, Robert. Thank you for the correction. And it's those three items in the middle, it's the middle item there. And you can see up to, sorry, the type is so small, $5.5 million or something. I mean, it's really a lot of money. And so I think it does merit some more investigation.
All right, I will have some questions in that realm after we hear from Long Lamb as well.
Okay. Good evening, directors. So I'll be presenting the fiscal year 21 fiscal year end reports to you. So this reports pretty much summarize the district's fiscal activities for the fiscal year. It provides recommendations for allocating the year-end budget savings to the different district's fund balance reserve that we currently have. Just a brief background of how we account for our finance operations. The district uses fund accounting to record financial activities. We currently have 4 major funds. We have the general funds, which is the district general operating funds for day-to-day operations. We have the capital improvement project funds. This funds accounts for all capital related activities pertaining to the district's 7 fire stations, the special operation warehouse, and various property owned by the district. Then we have the debt service fund. This fund is used to account for all our debt related activities. Then lastly, we have the Urban Search and Rescue Special Revenue Funds. This fund is used to account for federal grant activities. As for this report, we will be mainly focusing on the general fund, the CIP funds, and the debt service fund. The reports for the USAR special revenue funds is under the consent section of tonight's meeting. So you can take a look at the year-end reports for the special revenue funds there. So I'm gonna dive into the actual report itself. So in fiscal year 21, the district had a beginning fund balance for the 3 major funds at 72.4 million. And we ended
Long, if I could just ask you, if you're referring to the report, could you tell us which page?
Oh yeah,
you're
sure.
referring to?
Sounds okay. Okay, so if you look at page 64 of the package, on the first chart, You'll see,
Long, I'm sorry to interrupt you again. If you could
Yes.
refer to which page out of 16, I think that'll be easier for us.
oh, okay, got it.
If you, if,
Okay, sounds good.
very good. Thank you. Thank
Got
you.
it. So it'll be page three, page 3 of the reports. So the first charts summarize the executive summary of the 3 major funds that we have. Our beginning fund balance is 72.4 millions. And then we ended the year with 71 millions. So our fund balance for the 3 major funds decreased by 1.4 millions in the current year, in the fiscal year. Then on the same page 3, on this chart on the bottom, that gives you the summary of the general fund's fiscal activities for the fiscal year. The district's general fund revenues at the end of the year total to 70.1 million. This is comprised of 60.3 millions in property taxes and 9.8 millions in other operating revenues. If you compare the year-end actuals to the amended budgets, our revenues, we actually received 10.1 million more than what we had budgeted, and that was 16.9% over our fiscal year's budget. Then if you were to compare the fiscal year 21 versus the fiscal year 20 actual, we had an increase of 6 million or 9.4 million percent over the prior years. In the middle section of the charts, that breaks down the expenditures for the fiscal year. We ended the year with a total of 58.7 millions. This is comprised of 42.8 millions in wages and benefits, 7.5 millions other operating expenditures, and 8.4 millions in CalPERS unfunded extra liability payments that we made during the fiscal year. So you compare the year-end actual to what we had budgeted, we actually went under by, we were under the amended budget by 4.3 millions. Then if you were compared to fiscal year 21 versus fiscal year 20, we spent about 8.3 millions more than prior year's actual. Then in fiscal year 21, our operating transfer in from a fund balance reserve to general operating cash is 4 millions. Then our transfer out from the general funds to other funds, the CIPs and debt service, total to 10.4 millions. So at the end of the fiscal year, the district have a budget savings of 5.1 millions for allocation to the fund balance reserve. Moving on to page 4. So in the middle of page 4, this breaks down our property taxes revenues. As you know, our property tax revenues is the majority of the revenues that we receive for our districts. Our property tax revenues at the end of the year total is 60.3 millions. This represents 86% of the district-wide total revenues for the fiscal year. Our property tax revenues increased by 5.6 million, right, at 10.3% over the amended budgets, and we had a 4.1 million or 7.3 million over the prior year's actual. One thing I should point out is the secure property tax. Our secure property tax is our most significant property tax that we receive. And this represents about 95% of the total property tax revenues for the district. So on a yearly basis, we usually adopt a rate increase for the secure property tax. Then if you go to page 6 of the reports, the chart will list out the other operating revenues that we received during the year. Our other operating revenues received total to 9.8 million, and this represents about 14% of the district-wide total revenues. Our other operating revenues had an increase of 4.5 million or 84.7% over the amended budget, and had a 2.22 million over the prior year's actual. One thing I should point out is the intergovernmental revenues had a huge increase this year of about 2.8 million from the prior years. This is related to previous wildfire deployments that we just got reimbursed for it. And there were increase in redevelopment agency property tax pass-through revenues in the fiscal year since there's an increase in activities.
Lon, could I ask a question about that, please?
Yes.
I'm a little confused by what you just said.
Okay.
In terms of the reimbursements,
Right.
are you saying we got reimbursements for a prior fiscal year that were unexpected, or they were just higher this year?
No. So basically, when we file for claims reimbursement from wildfires, we send it into CalOES. They review it, but the actual disbursement of the funds sometimes did not happen in the fiscal year, and it overlaps to the next fiscal year. So we have a receivable balance.
But we are on an accrual basis, so we would have recognized those revenues in the prior fiscal year because we would have accrued them, wouldn't we?
We would accrue the prior fiscal year, but then in the modified accrual basis of counting, we cannot recognize revenues if it's after the 60. Let's say if we were to receive the funds after 60 days, we cannot actually recognize the revenues in that fiscal year. So it needs to be within the 60 days availability periods and the measurement period.
So you're saying that any receivable that takes more than 60 days to pay will
Yes.
be reversed?
Will be booked as unearned revenues in our balance sheet.
I see.
And until we receive the funds, then we can recognize the revenues in that fiscal year.
And is that our rule, or is that some?
It's part of a general accepted accounting principle. So we're operating on modified accounting basis of accounting. So that is the rule that we follow. Is in the CAFR, is in the annual comprehensive financial reports.
Okay,
Robert, I'm sorry, Chuck, are you done?
yeah, I was just thanking him.
Okay, Robert?
So I can get an understanding So
Yes.
first question is, you mentioned that there was a time lag.
Right.
And so so I assume that somewhere either early part, middle part, or latter part of fiscal year, there is some documentation going to where it needs to go, CAL FIRE or whatever, for
Right.
reimbursement. So is 60 days. So they would have to get it before the 60-day period of time before our fiscal year end in order to be counted for that year, or is it historically that it's everything presented at a certain time and it's always going to be after our fiscal year end?
No. It just depends on the timing of the deployments for the wildfire. So we have, let's say we received an order today and we were deployed for a week. All the expenditures that incur in that 1 week of deployments, when that personnel return to their home stations, they would provide the documents to our finance staff. We prepare the claims. We have 30 days to prepare the claims, submit it to CalOES. CalOES has their timing to review the claims and to scrutinize whatever they need required. Once it's approved, the funding may take some time depending on the state's funding status and other funding status that they have to deal with. We don't necessarily see the revenues until they disperse to us, and we don't have a control over that in terms of when we get disbursement for our claims.
So is there a, I don't know, I know each billing is going to be, there's maybe different timing on it, but do you have a sense of how long it take them to approve it, and how long typically it takes to receive it? Is there?
So it depends on the deployments pretty much. If it's a full strike team and they how many days they were deployed and how much they spent. So all that factors into the timing of the reviews and how many strike team went on deployments for the wildfires. So there's a lot of anomalies, I would say. But we can take a look and we can see if when the timing in terms of when we receive, then we can provide a generalized time frame at a later time.
One last thing, Jim. So are you saying that the intergovernmental, because it was an increase in the revenues in that area, that it's all due to wildfire?
No. I'm not saying it's all due to wildfire, because the intergovernmental revenues column is a combinations of RDA revenues and the claims reimbursement revenues that goes in there too. And anything that's related to states reimbursement and stuff like that goes into intergovernmental revenues column.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jim?
Rob.
Joe, how much money does the state owe us to date? Do we have like a roundabout figure?
We track our deployments, and I can provide that information to you, but I don't have that information at the moment.
Is it over $1 million?
Let's see. It's around there. I would have to get a definite answer for you.
Yeah, is it more than 2 million?
No, it's not more than 2 million.
And how long has this been that they owed us this money?
So the fiscal year 21, we had 35 deployments. How long?
No, I'd like to suggest perhaps Lon could compile these numbers and provide them to the finance.
That'd be great. Thank you, Jim.
And then, finance could report out on them next month.
Great, thank
I'm curious myself, how much do they owe us and how long does it take for us to receive payments? A range, does it take 3 months, or are we waiting 6 months or longer?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So to continue, so we're on page 7 of the reports.
Yeah.
On page 7, this breaks down the general fund expenditures into 3 sections, I believe. So the first section is the wages and benefits expenditures. During fiscal year 21, we ended the year with a total of 42.8 million. This represents about 72.9% of the district-wide total expenditures. This excludes the operating transfer. So we did not factor in the operating transfers in the percentage. Wages and benefits came under the budget by $1.8 millions or 4%. But it had an increase of 5.5 millions over the prior year's actual. So compensate, just to go into the details of each columns. Compensation expenditures was 3.1 million or 10.1% under the amended budgets for fiscal year 21. This is mainly due to various vacancies during the fiscal year that were unfilled. For overtime expenditures, we totaled to 7.9 million in the fiscal year. This represents about 2.3 million or 42.3% over the amended budgets. And I had an increase of 3.2 million or 69.9% over the prior year's actual. So it is, I want to stress out something that you should keep in mind is that in the district's policy, we do have a daily minimum level of staffing position for our frontline apparatus. So we try to staff all our personnel so that we can cover all the apparatus that we have in our front line for operations. So from time to time, the overtime expenditures varies because this is based on different variables such as wildfire deployments, PTOs from personnel, workers' comp, and personnel's training from different programs. So of the 7.9 million in overtime in fiscal year 21, 5.9 of that is for fire suppression operation. 1.1 million of that is reimbursable for CAL FIRE deployments, and 900,000 is in district's program operations.
So I'm trying to work the math in my head and it's I'm a little slow on catching it. So if there's out of the 7.9 million, there's a 5.9 million in fire suppression and operation, and it takes under all of what you just got through saying. And then you mentioned there was a 1.1 million in reimbursable from CAL FIRE.
Correct.
And then
so 1.1 million of that is reimbursable because those are CAL FIRE deployments.
Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to wrap my head around. Please forgive me for my ignorance. I'm just trying to wrap my head around the total dollar amount, the 7.9 million, and then kind of compartmentalize each one of the amounts to kind of understand, how it increased to 7.9 versus the prior years. It was a little bit less, almost $1 million less.
Okay.
And that increase is a result of I assume more fires took place last year than the year before. So you got more deployment in that regard. But then you threw in a twist here where you mentioned that there's a backfill, there's a certain amount of staffing that need to take place on a day-to-day basis. And if the staff is not available, then some staff, our current pool of staff would have to backfill to make that happen.
That's correct.
And that's where the overtime come into play.
That's correct.
So
I did
one other thing, let me because
Okay.
I lose that thought. So as a result, is that indicating that we are understaffed? Do we need to have more people, or because with $7.some million or almost $5, somebody we could have a lot more people if that was necessary? I don't know. I don't know how it works.
So like Chief Navarro was said earlier, we did a comparison between the fluctuation for overtime, and I can briefly go over some of the areas that had increased during the fiscal year when you compare to the fiscal year 21 between 20 and 20.
Yep. Jim.
Yeah, Rob.
Yeah, before we go into something else, I'd like to follow up what Robert's train of thought was a little bit, since he brought up some things that I'm trying to understand myself. May I continue? Because Robert brought up a lot of good points, and I want to continue with Robert's. When we're looking at that 7.9, you mentioned that 1.2 of that is reimbursable by CAL FIRE. And we have to backfill those positions if our firefighters are deployed in other areas. But who pays when we have to backfill within our fire district?
Let me jump in here real quick because
That's what I'm, Chief, Chief, that's what I'm concerned about, is that are we eating that where we have to backfill positions if we send firefighters on deployment? That's what I want to see. Are we eating that, whatever that difference is from that 7.9 to 1.2?
Chief Coyle has run that program for a while. Chief Long ran that before him, and Stevens in the interim. We sign every year with a contract with Cal OES, and basically there's a prorated that they have for the position, and it also includes the backfill, because we just can't send somebody out there and backfill. The bottom line to it, probably in simple terms, is that we actually usually come out on the positive side of that. Very seldom. We may be negative on a couple of different issues on it, but overall, our expenditure out of pocket for what we're doing, paying our employees in the backfill, we come out on top. And that's why you're seeing, Long has got it in the detail in there, that we had so many CAL FIRE deployments this year was fairly significant, and some of them pretty long. And last year was much the same kind of thing. So that has impact.
Yeah. Jim, may I just ask one more question?
Sure, Rob.
Yeah. Chief, when we're looking at that reimbursement, is it dollar for dollar as what we're actually paying our firefighters, or is it what the CalPERS firefighters rate is? Are we getting full reimbursement for that overtime?
They have a rate on which they sign us up on the front end of that. And it's not exactly the same rate that we have here. Sometimes we make more, sometimes we make a little less. The bottom line to it is that year for year, we basically come out on the positive side of it.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, Chief Coyle has really got a very definitive spreadsheet that he can go over to you. It's
okay.
But I'm trying to summarize, because I think maybe the concern is, are we fairly getting paid back for what we're getting out? And
exactly, Chief.
Yes, we don't lose money when we get on a deployment. We may lose on one position because we have stipends that we give that individual, because we have a captain paramedic go out there and they pay as a captain rate, but we always make it up on other places too. So we, at this point, I can confidently say that we're getting reimbursed.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Jim.
All right. I just have a couple.
Really, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to pick up on something that Robert said earlier as well, asking this question about staffing levels, given, this level of overtime. And I brought this up with Chief Schaefer, I believe it was just last month, that, we get these aggregate numbers, but we really don't know what generated these numbers, what specific tasks created the need for the overtime. We're backfilling positions. Is there where is that tipping point between it's more efficient to use overtime versus hire additional personnel? And I think Chief Schaefer committed to collecting, more and presenting more detailed information. So that type of analysis could be done. Because I have the same question, Robert. Is it, where is that sweet spot between, filling work hours with overtime versus additional personnel?
Yeah.
I know it can be a pretty complex analysis, but you have to have the data to analyze to get there.
Do we have the data do you think we have enough data to be able to kind of do a sweep of that to kind of?
Yeah, so Francine did help with the data mining for this analysis. So I do have a cheat sheet that summarized like auto fluctuation and explanation for each fluctuation over time. But I can briefly go over the vacancies in fiscal year 21 with you because I have that available right now. If you would like.
I think if it's going to be germane to us, if we have to approve this, and if it's going to be germane, it seemed like there's a deeper dive that we need to get into, and I don't know if we have enough. This is the appropriate setting to do that. Maybe we need to have a special setting just to do this level of deeper dive, or not. I don't know. I'm not sure what the outcome for tonight is.
Chuck?
Excuse me, I wanted to add a little bit to what was being said. I had made a comment at a previous meeting that I was skeptical, not disbelieving, but just saying, I wish I had the data regarding whether we were fully reimbursed for the deployments that we were sending people on. And I had the opportunity to meet with Chief Coyle, Dan Coyle, about this. And I'll tell you, I was pleasantly surprised by the kind of data that is available. And I'd urged him to, at some point, present it to both the Finance Committee and the board as a whole, because there's kind of two ways to look at it. You can look at it for the whole year and tally it up, but you can also look at it, each deployment, for example, as a case history, as a self-contained case history. And he's tracked these things where he looked at who went on the deployment, who stayed back in the district, who had to work overtime back at the district, and so forth, and kind of created a case history. And I came away from it feeling that in general, we make a little bit more than we spend, and that had not been my impression previously. So that was one issue, but I do think I like to see the board be reassured. I have lots of friends in the community who ask me about this all the time, and I've never been able to answer. So I think having some data about this so that people don't feel that they're supporting statewide efforts at the expense of local taxpayers, I think that's an important point. The second point, though, is a little bit different that you just raised, Jim, and that is, how many staff should we have? At what point does it make sense to have more people, given that we always have a certain number of people needed to do backfill and to cover PTO and to cover illness and things like that? And that's a study I don't believe it has been done at this point, and I think would be worthwhile doing. So I think that's an important point.
All right, just to move us past this point, perhaps, Chuck, you could address this in your next Finance Committee meeting and perhaps refine just what that ask is, so that we could get a fuller briefing on this specific issue. And to be clear, this personnel issue, the overtime hours versus FTEs and those types of issues. And do we have the data we need? Do we need more data? Is it a matter of analysis? But I think that might be a good place to start so we can move forward from this point tonight.
Okay, I don't think, by the way, that it can be covered in one meeting, but I think that it would be, make sense for the next couple of meetings to address it.
Okay. Lon,
Dir-
perhaps you could move on off this point. I think we,
Okay, so so on retirement expenditures now. So our retirement expenditures for the fiscal year, we ended at 6.9 millions. Within this 6.9 millions, we had 4.5 millions in CalPERS normal contribution costs. And the rest is 2.4 millions that we had to make for the required annual unfunded accrual liability contribution amounts. So starting in about 2 fiscal years ago, CalPERS required us to do upfront payments now for our annual unfunded accrual liabilities contribution. So we've been paying that every year upfront in July. Moving on to page 8. So page 8, the chart in the middle will breaks down the extraordinary expenditures related to CalPERS unfunded liabilities payments. So we made 8.4 million payments in fiscal year 21. This 8.4 millions represents about 14.4% of the district-wide total expenditures. Within this 8.4, it is comprised of different variables. One of that is the fiscal year budgeted funds. We budgeted funds for 2.5 millions. Then we used existing reserve fund balance of 3.2 millions that we had from previous years. Then the 2.4 millions is in the forms of the difference between the district's budgeted employer contribution rate to the normal cost from CalPERS. So we've been doing this for since I've been here, but we usually budget our contribution rates for safety employees at a higher rate than the actual contribution rates that CalPERS provides. On page 9 of the reports, this breaks down the other operating expenditures. We ended the year with 7.5 millions, and this represents about 12.7% of the district-wide total expenditures. Other operating expenditures came in under the amended budgets by 2.5 millions or 25.2% and had an increase of 1.5 millions or 24.2% from the prior years. Service and supplies expenditures total to 7.1 millions. This is under the amended budgets by 1.9 millions or 20.7%, but it had an increase of 1.5 million from prior year. The main reason for the increase is due to loosening the restrictive shelter-in-place measure, which allowed the district to make more purchasing activities in the fiscal year. Next is the fixed assets expenditures in the fiscal year total to 339,000 approximately, and we came in under the amended budget by 650,000. One thing I should note is that for fixed assets expenditures, there were various purchase order in fiscal year 21 that were related to fixed assets that was not carried out, but then we had to carry it forward because we have an open purchase order for it. So that's the reason why you're seeing it's under our amended budgets. For page 10, this chart will break down the other operating transfer that for the general fund. We had an operating transfer from the operating reserve to the general fund operating cash of 4 million in a fiscal year. The district used 3.2 millions from the transfer into Comingo that would for the PERS payments that we made during the fiscal year. And 800,000 of that was from the encumbrance reserve associated with purchase orders, open purchase order from fiscal year 20. That's that. Operating transfer out for the fiscal year total to be 10.4 millions. The general fund transferred 7.6 million to the debt service fund in the fiscal year and 2.8 million to the CIP funds. So then the next page would be page 11. This page lists all our open purchase order that we currently have in the fiscal year 21. These purchase order were budgeted. We had budgeted funds in the fiscal year 21, but I guess the products we never received it, or there were some delays. So we had open purchase order at the end of fiscal year, totaling to $755,489. Page 12 will break down our general fund balance reserve that we for the fiscal year 21. Overall, we had a 1.1 million increase from 44.3 millions to 45.4 millions in the fiscal year. And our total unassigned fund balance at the fiscal year total to be 5.1 million to be allocated to the different reserve. On page 13, this provides our staff's recommendations to allocate some of the unassigned fund balance in fiscal year 21 to the different reserves.
I'm sorry, Long, to
Yes.
back up just a little bit. On that unassigned fund balance of the $5,075,000, what's the process for assigning that to a category?
Okay, so basically in the past, staff would provide recommendations to allocate the funds to the different reserve. The board has the discretion to discuss and agree or amend or request different allocations should the board wishes to.
So the finance committee is involved in assigning that amount?
The finance committee did review the reports and they did recommend that it be forwarded to the full board.
But and perhaps I don't understand.
Oh, okay.
I'm looking at this total unassigned fund balance of $5 million. If I understand you correctly, that gets assigned to one of those four categories. Is that correct or no?
So we're basically providing recommendations to allocate the unassigned fund balance of 5.1 millions to the different general fund balance reserve that we currently have.
Okay, so who are you making those recommendations to?
I'm making the recommendations to the board of directors so that they can discuss whether if we can allocate the unassigned fund balance to the different reserve.
Okay, I don't want to derail your presentation.
Ultimately, let me help out here just a little bit. Instead of the accounting language and just some plain language, we ended up with some funding at the end of the year. Staff will take a look at and project forward what they perceive as being funds that they would allocate. A big chunk of that could be in apparatus replacement. It could be in facilities and things that are coming forward. And that be rolled up into those funds that Long has already established, and he has to establish those by accounting practices. But the board basically has full authority. It comes to them and rightfully so, you'll be asking, what are we projecting here? So for example, I know before the board, there has been a long discussion on Fire Station 1. At what point are we going to build and what exactly we're going to build? But let's face it, we have to start accruing some money for that project. It's going to be fairly substantial. So when we end up with 5 million at the end of the year, it's a good question to say is how are we going to allocate that? Are we going to put it in capital? Or are we going to do something else with it? But it's fully for the board. Staff will roll it up as best they can and give it to the finance committee. Finance committee can ask some questions and we can make some adjustments. Comes back to the full board and have the same kind of discussion you're having right now. And Dr. McLaughlin have the background I have. I never had this kind of experience. It was always the other direction.
That's right. So that answers my question. Robert?
Yes, two questions. My assumption is at the end of this year, right now we have $5 million. First question is this a unique situation that has occurred this year? Has it occurred over the last 5 years with some balance? If so, then were those funds allocated out somewhere? And if so, is there a standard policy, funding policy or investment policy or excess fund policy that's in place that directs that money somewhere? Or is it pretty much whatever is on the end of the tongue at that period of time, that's where the funds go? Is there any kind of policy set that directs that money to a certain place? And do we have such a policy of that nature?
So just to answer your first questions, ever since I've been with the district, we have every year have same savings that we need to allocate to the different reserve. As far as the policies in terms of directing the unassigned fund balance, we do not currently have such policies. We usually provide our recommendations to finance committee meetings. And based on the directions from the finance committee meetings, that would provide our recommendation or steer where the fundings would go to the different reserve.
And in the past, where have those funds kind of, just ballpark, you know?
So most of those funds, excess funds would go into CIP, capital improvement project funds. And the remainings would go into PERS capital, PERS payments for unfunded actual liabilities. And some of them went to apparatus rolling stocks. So those are the three main reserve categories that we usually allocates the funds to.
And that's based upon some people getting together saying, hey, this is what we want to do this year.
No, that's because since we're a fire service operation, our apparatus costs a lot. So we try to have enough reserves so that we can replace our apparatus when we need to. Same thing with equipment, some equipment replacements, and those various reserves.
One of the things I'm trying to see if we can establish, because it doesn't seem like we have it. Maybe I'm just looking at it a different way. We need to have a waterfall for this money, and everybody know what a waterfall is. As it goes over the dam or over the ridge, that there are certain buckets should be a priority for that funds to fall into, based upon what we may consider as our priority as a board and as a district that we may need, and we need to assure that each one of those buckets based on its need and its priority, is getting filled to the point to where for our own long-term investments into that particular project. So if we don't have such a thing, I would encourage that we begin to look into that for that particular reason.
Chuck, do you have any perspective on that from the finance committee, that process?
Well, I think Long's right that we don't have a formal policy. We have, in recent times, wanted to build up what I'll call the depreciation. It's had different names, but it's the replacement fund for both facilities and equipment and apparatus and so forth. So we're trying to fund that, and we've been trying to pay off the unfunded liability, which keeps unfortunately getting larger and larger the more we pay it off. And that's been the priorities. So we've had kind of a consistent priority, but we haven't had a formal policy.
Okay. Long, why don't you continue with your presentation?
Okay. So basically, our first recommendations for the allocation is to allocate $755,489 of the 5.1 millions in the unassigned fund balance to the encumbrance reserve in order to provide fundings for the open purchase order in fiscal year 21. The second recommendations that we have is to allocate $843,419 of the 5.2 millions in the unassigned fund balance to the apparatus rolling stock reserve for the future replacement of apparatus and vehicles. The amounts to be allocated was derived from the actual fiscal year 21 depreciation expense for all our apparatus and vehicles in the fiscal year. The third recommendations is to allocate $285,669 of the 5.2 millions in the unsigned fund balance to equipment replacement reserve for future uses to replace worn out equipment. The amounts was derived from the actual fiscal year 21 depreciation expense for fixed assets equipment.
So if my math is right, you got in those three numbers, we're looking at about 1.4, maybe 1.5 million. And then there's a balance of out of 5.8 million, we got somewhere around 4 or 3.5 million unassigned.
Right. So that 3.2 millions will be addressed in the next page, which is page 14 of the reports. So page 14 of the
Lamb, before you go on, could I ask a question, please, about the number one
Yes.
recommendation?
Sure.
The open purchase orders, do I understand correctly that these have not been expensed at this point? They're
They have not.
They're liabilities, essentially. They're orders. Okay, but haven't you really provided for their funding already through the budget for the new year? In other words, you've got revenues that are going to cover these expenses, right? Or are these not included in the expense budget?
So these are not included in the expenditures budgets for fiscal year 22. That's why we need to allocate or allocate some of the unassigned fund balance to the encumbrance reserve so that we can use the encumbrance reserve in fiscal year 22 to fund the open purchase order, because that is the time when we need to expense it, because that's the time when we receive the product.
Just out of curiosity, why wouldn't you have put them in the expense budget for the new year?
Because it's due to the timing issues. We had to complete the budget process in the June timeframe, and we don't close the fiscal year until August.
Hmm.
And so does that mean you thought they were going to be expensed in the prior fiscal year?
So we try to wait until August, within 60 days, to see if we receive the products to be included for the accruals for fiscal year 21.
I see. So in a sense, we're looking at a surplus from last year that also has a little bit of carryover of expenditures that we haven't paid for yet.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Lamb, why don't you continue? And I would just ask, let's let Lamb finish his presentation, and then we'll pick up any questions after he's done.
So on page 14, this what breaks down our capital improvement project funds. Our capital improvement project funds, or CIP funds, started fiscal year with a beginning balance of 25.9 million, and we finished the fiscal year with 25.5 million. So activities in the fiscal year included a transfer in of 2.8 million from the general fund, and construction activities in the amount of 3.2 million. So overall, we just decreased our fund balance by 400,000 or so. So that brings up us to the fourth recommendations for the allocation of the 5.2 million. So our fourth recommendation is to allocate $2,10,286 from the unassigned fund balance to Fire Station 1 for future station updates and rebuild. Our fifth recommendation is to allocate $1,180,239 of the 5.2 million in unassigned fund balance to various CIP stations to begin funding the depreciation of Fire Station for future rebuild. So the 1.1 million that's stated is the actual fiscal year 21 depreciation expense that we will be reporting out. The last page is on page 15. Page 15 will summarize the debt service fund. Our debt service fund had a beginning fund balance of 2.2 million, and we finished the fiscal year with 107,000. In the fiscal year 21, the general fund transferred in to the debt service fund of 7.6 million to be used to extinguish the district's 2009 certificate of participation series B. The district incurred expenditures of 9.8 million due to payoff of the 8.9 million in principal and 863,000 in interest for the outstanding bonds. Lastly, due to the timing of the debt payoff, there were outstanding receivables that we have not received from the Internal Revenue Service related to our IRS interest subsidy that we were supposed to get for the payments, the interest payments. And that concludes the presentations.
All right, any questions for Long? All right. Is there a motion to accept the report and adopt the resolution?
So Jim,
Yes.
I'll move to accept the report, but it sounds to me as if there are a few pretty important items that the board wanted to take back to the finance committee. So I don't know if I want to, well, I mean, we can, I guess, approve some of the amendments, but I don't want the, some of these suggestions to like kind of go by the wayside. So do you want to take some of these suggestions and just bring it back to the finance committee to look at, including, I mean, just a couple of things that I think, y'all were talking about in terms of backfill, overtime, and even a policy on, oh God, was it procurement? I can't even remember. It's
Unassigned funds.
yeah, I think it was like page 13 or 14, somewhere in that area. So, I mean, I can move to accept the report. But if y'all want to relook at some of these amendments again, based on the feedback that you gave tonight, maybe some of this should go back to the finance committee. But I mean, also Chuck's the finance committee chair. So, you know, I'll defer to him and his thoughts on that.
Chuck, do you have any response or thoughts?
Well, I think Virginia's right. I don't think we have to be in a hurry to approve the recommendations for where the 5 million goes. And all of that is reversible anyway. I mean, we can move it whenever we feel like it. But I think we should make a motion to accept the report
Right.
and adopt the resolution of authorizing amendments to the budget.
Okay, well, I can make that motion, which was what I was gonna do anyway for accepting the 2021 fiscal year end report. And I'm happy to make a motion to adopt the resolution authorizing amendments to the fiscal year 2021 and fiscal year 21-22 budgets and allocation of funds for fiscal year 2021.
So your motion is to both accept the report and then adopt the resolutions?
Yeah, based on what Chuck was saying, I just wanted to make sure that what my concerns were would be covered based on what everyone else was saying in terms of the concerns that they had that I just mentioned. But if Chuck's okay with, you know, moving this forward, and, you know, and you are right about the 5 million. I mean, I'm happy with that. I just wanted to make sure that we covered in our committee meeting the concerns that everyone else had earlier during Long's report.
Well, maybe you could just ask Long, excuse me, Long. There's no reason that we couldn't leave the 5 million in the unassigned category, is there?
For now,
For now, you can leave it in there. It does not have to be allocated currently. We can just leave it there for now. If you don't like the recommendations, then, however, I should stress that if we were to leave it in there for now, I would need to tell the auditor that our financial or finals, and we're not going to allocate any unassigned to the committed or different fund balance reserve that we currently have. So this is pretty much the final step to wrap up our GL closing and do the final entries for the auditors to provide the documents to for the audits.
Long,
well, wait, could we do that? Oh,
Long,
sorry.
Are you under a time constraint to
Yeah,
do that?
I was just gonna ask that.
I am, yes. So our audit is scheduled to start their field work on November 15th. So we're compiling the necessary documents so that we can forward to our auditors so that they can come and inspect our work.
Okay, so if we accepted these amendments tonight, then we would essentially be approving the recommended allocations, right? Those unassigned.
Right. But however, the board has the discretions to move our current fund balance reserve that we currently have in our general funds to different categories if they like to. It does not have to be, I would say, done
Set in
through this
stone.
format. Yes, done through this format of the year-end fiscal reports.
Virginia, does that change your view?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of trying to be sensitive to, the timing of things. I mean, it doesn't really change my view. I mean, I just want maximum flexibility for us long so that, we can, I'm trying to buy time, even though I know there's not a lot of time to buy. You know what I'm saying? So if you think that accepting this report and these amendments make sense right now for your purposes with some flexibility in terms of moving things around later, I mean, I just don't know how that would affect our audit, I guess, is
So by accepting this report, you're pretty much finalizing the final step of the fiscal year
Right.
21 fiscal year-end close. And if you're not liking where you put the reserve funds in fiscal year 21, we can bring it back to the finance committee meetings, and you can discuss on how to, I guess, reallocate some of our fund balance reserve to the different, to your liking, pretty much.
Well, I just, like I said, want to be sensitive. If we, what the board was saying earlier, our next finance committee meeting is, I think, November 2nd, which is the first Tuesday of the month, right? So that
Right.
would be before the November 15th deadline, but obviously after,
Yes.
before the next meeting.
So there is a time constraint.
Yeah.
Robert, I see your hand.
Yes, I think I think Lon did a good job in his presentation. I think he opened some doors that opened my eyes to some areas that maybe the board really need to take a look at. And I think it seems like in listening along that there is a flexibility and the board has a latitude to move money around as it sees fit and
Yes.
important to do. I think we need to get his heartburn off the table right now, which is get the audit thing going. And then as it moves through the finance committee to look at those issues, and maybe we need to kind of outline what those areas that we want to talk about and spend time talking about it, formulating our policies around it, and creating that waterfall that we think is important based on staff feedback. But I think in terms of just approving it at this point is really not casting us in concrete on thinking and developing what we need to develop in terms of our policies.
Yeah, I mean, so Jim, I would just keep my motion as it is then, which is basically what Long is, in the staff are recommending at this point, just to
All
get
right.
that.
Is there a second to that?
I'll second.
All right. Any further discussion?
So I just would like to clarify for the record, is this motion to adopt the resolution, accepting the report as well as the three items in the resolution, or is there some modification to that resolution?
No, it's
The
the
former.
former.
Thanks for the clarification.
All right. All right, if there's no further discussion. Michelle, is there any public comment?
If there's any member of the public that would like to provide public comment, please raise your hand or hit *9 on your phone. And I do not see any public comments.
All right. It just, all right, would you please call the vote?
Director Bernstein,
Aye.
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Crowley,
Aye.
Director Solano is absent, Director McLaughlin.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Long, thank you so much for all your work in putting that together and for your presentation this evening.
Thank you, Long. That was a lot of work. You did a
You're
great
welcome.
job. Thanks.
All right, number 12, approve the annual adoption of the district's investment policy and district treasurer approval for fiscal year 21-22. Chief Navarro, I don't know if you want to address that or have Long address it.
No, I believe Lon can probably address that better than I can. I really haven't had a chance to really sit down and take a look at that. I think
right.
every year the board looks at the same issue and looks at policy rather than do that. Lon, do you have an opinion on it?
So I'll present it. So this is our district's annual investment policy that we usually provide to on an annual basis for our adoptions, and to formalize the appointment of the administrative service manager, that's the district's treasurer for fiscal year 22. So this investment policy serves pretty much as a foundation that the district's investment activities has to abide by. And the investment policy follows the same guidelines set forth by the California government codes. And our policy is in line with the government codes. We had Nicole from Hanson and Bridges reviewed it and provide expanded language, verbiage, and just to clean up some of the government codes verbiage. So there is one update that I want to point out. It's related to the LAIF limit that was listed in the staff reports. So our LAIF, the US Treasury, California Treasury has increased the LAIF limits of their investments from 65 millions to 75 millions in fiscal year, starting in January 1st, 2020. So fiscal year 21. As far as our investments for the districts, our investments are currently in local agency investment funds, which is the LAIF funds, and is managed by the California State Treasurer. Interest earnings in a LAIF is very minimal, but it's the safest investment for the district. And I don't foresee us going into other investment in fiscal year 22 until someone's that's where we're at. So that's all my presentation. So if you don't have any questions, I can answer. I can try to answer if you have any questions.
Yeah.
Robert?
Oh,
I have a general question. I noticed on the first page in the background, it talked about, I guess, alluding to the fact that there are investment policy provided sound framework to ensure safety of principal adequate liquidity. But it said the policy provide guidelines for prudent investment to support safeguarding district funds. My question is this, I mean, is there a time where the board, because I'm trying to recall if we had it last year or this year, a time where annually where we set aside a date to review our investment in our policy. Have we ever just, I don't recall in the last couple of years that we have done that. And is that a wise thing to do to make sure that we are operating within what we think we should be operating within as a board and safeguarding our funds?
Jim?
Do you want to address that?
Yeah, I was going to address Robert's question because historically in the past, I think even before Robert got on, we have had the board look at the investment policies in the past, and then it became almost like there weren't that many changes. I mean, slight changes, and then the finance committee started looking at them, or at it, and it hasn't really changed that much over the years. But if we want to take a closer look at it, that's fine too. But I just wanted to give Robert a historic context that when I first got on the board, the whole board had a chance to look at the investment policy and review it and make changes if needed or desired.
If I may,
Yes,
I
please,
think, I think it would probably, for me, it would be probably a good idea if we think about looking into it and just reflecting on what we have been through this year around this issue. And somewhere along the line, the eyes got off the prize, it appears, and we have ended up, I guess, paying more out than we probably should have for whatever reason. And therefore, it prompted me to kind of ask myself, I don't recall we ever talking about it or just looking at all our investment once a year. Doesn't have to be a long thing, but just looking at them, seeing where they are, seeing if it makes sense to still hold them. I think it's a good idea for us to kind of get there, even though, because I don't know them all. And I think annually we should do something of that nature just to kind of, be prudent in our
Chuck,
judgments.
do you have some?
Yeah, I wonder, there were some, first of all, this represents no change from the past year. But in the past year, there were some substantial changes in wording and so forth, but not in the, I would say, conservative nature of the investments that we make. And just for Robert's question, the board has to approve this every single year, and we typically do it at this time, but it's been a very perfunctory kind of approval because we have to make sure that we've nominated the person that's going to be treasurer of the district, and we do that through this approval. So we have approved it every year, but nobody's really ever discussed it. We talk about safety and so forth. And in fact, this investment, conservative investment, is not safe. Let's be clear. We're making less than 1% on our money, and we're losing between 2 and 5% every year on inflation. So we're losing money every year right now. It's not safely invested. But it's safe in terms of nobody's going to steal it and run away with it. But the fact is it's losing value. I think it should have a very thorough review, but I think that should await the arrival of a new financial person in the district, and we ought to discuss that at that time. I think this tonight is not the time to be changing the policy, but I agree with Robert's thought that this should be reviewed carefully, and we should really decide kind of affirmatively that we want to either be conservative or middle of the road or whatever we want to do. But we've been very, very, very conservative up to now, to the extent that we are losing money.
Yeah, my thing, if I may, Jim, I just want to thank you, Chuck, for that historical perspective on that. I just want to get us in a position to, we know once a year, no matter what day that is, that this is what we're going to look at. And we're going to take all our investments and slam it up against the wall and analyze and see, do we really still need to do this? Is there something else we can put our money in? And so as Chuck mentioned, that we shouldn't be losing it, and just do that, take a few minutes just to do that annually so that we can assure ourselves that no stone has been unturned. The public can rest assured that we are good stewards of the money, of the taxpayers' money, and that we have done our due diligence in that respect. That's the only thing I'm just really pointing to. Let's set a date, whether we wait for the new finance person, and this I hope it don't get lost in the transition in that, but we just need to fix a date that's what we're gonna do, and let's just do it.
All right. Chuck, could you be, as chair of the finance committee, could you just make that part of your agenda to do this type of review of not so much the policy, but if I understand it correctly, the actual investments that we've made, where are they held, and
Right, I would be happy to make it part of the committee meeting, but I think we can ask Lon here too, but I think this is part of the regular calendar that we do at the kickoff of the new fiscal year each year. So I think it is calendared, in fact, by the district.
This particular ask,
This, yes.
Yes.
is that correct, Lon?
I'm sorry, so our current investment, our investments is currently in Lathe.
No, that's not the question. This comes up every year at this time, doesn't it?
It
You
usually
mean the
comes-
investment policy?
Okay, so the investment policy usually comes up near the beginning of the fiscal year. So it usually gets presented to the finance committee meetings in June or July timeframe to get approvals for the new fiscal year, the new fiscal year's appointment of the treasurer.
I'm looking at more than just a policy, but looking at the investment itself. So we're looking at the investment, and then we're trying to understand if the investment is still relevant to us today, and what new policy we need to put in place at that point in time to change things up again, keep the policy, but looking at a different tool, investment tool. That's what I'm, to me, what makes sense.
So Jim,
Virginia?
Robert, I think what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you would want to understand what we're invested in, and so maybe we need to be looking at our investment portfolio. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, we
Yeah.
should
And to
look-
see how that matches up with the investment policy?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think.
Yeah, so Chuck, do you think it makes sense? I mean, we've done it before, but it hasn't, in terms of looking at the portfolio holdings, that has not been as regular as voting on, or not voting on, approving an investment policy. So, if both of y'all think, and it may be the right time to do this, to look and see, what's in the portfolio, should it be updated in term, meaning it as in the investment policy? Should we be looking at other instruments, taking into account the more macroeconomic perspective, as you'd mentioned, Chuck, from the inflation and all of that, maybe that's what we should put on our finance committee agenda, is to see what is our portfolio look like at this time, and how does it match up with our investment policy and what we might want in returns.
And report out to the board.
Yeah.
Okay.
And actually, Jim, that's a good point, because that could be a little stepping stone to have us, look at this investment policy again to see if this is where we want to be, or, figure out where we want to be. Does that make sense? But it could start at the finance committee. And so, I mean, I think if we can do that long, get our portfolios, I think that would be a good thing to do. And I don't know if
So-
you want to do it at the beginning of the year, the calendar year, or I don't know. I mean, what's easiest for the finance?
Just to interject, our investments are in the LAIF, local agency
Yeah.
investment funds. We do not have any other types of investment other than LAIF at the moment.
Right. So do we have what's in LAIF? The county should have their portfolio and what the investments are in LAIF.
Sure. Okay.
That's what I would want to see.
Got it.
I
Okay.
understand that we don't have, like I don't know, Charles Schwab account with our own
Sure.
investment portfolio, and I understand that the majority of our money is invested in LAIF,
Got it.
right? So that's what I would want to see, what it is that,
Sure.
and I think we did that. Oh my God, how long ago was that? I think when, probably right around the time I got on the board with Michelle.
So the finance committee would take up, as I understand, virtually all of our monies in life. Is that where we want to be? Is there, so I think that's the charge to the finance committee.
Well, I think it's a different, yes, in terms of looking at it, but where we want to be,
Right.
you know, we would have to, in my opinion, as a board, figure out what we want, right? I mean, LAIF is generally a safe investment for a reason, right? And I mean, it is tax dollars and we are the fiduciaries for tax dollars. And so we can't be too risky, obviously, but you know, I think some of the factors that Chuck's brought up and this is not the first time Chuck has brought these issues up. You know, we might want to just look at this. I mean, there's nothing wrong with looking and seeing what's in LAIF and seeing how that fits with what we want. But we as a board need to figure out what we want. We may not know that until we see what's in LAIF. Does that make sense?
It does. I would suggest that we, you know, we act to approve, you know, the policy and then ask, you know, ask the finance committee to evaluate, you know, how do we have our money invested and does it comply with the policy? Is there any indication that perhaps we should consider, you know, other investments? So is there?
I mean, the approval of the investment policy, as Chuck said, is, you know, pretty perfunctory, and we can always look at this again after we review what's in LAIF, but I agree. I mean, you might as well just approve the policy right now. I mean, it's the same. Nothing's really changed year over year. At least we have an approval of the policy.
I think what's going to change is our goals.
Yeah, but we can change the policy at any time, Robert. That's what I'm, yeah.
Chuck?
Oh, yeah, I think, and let's just to kind of start to work on a vocabulary about this. The policy itself is like the framework. It's the general rules. Robert just mentioned goals. I was about to mention the word priorities. Basically, we haven't really discussed what we want to accomplish. And the fact is, our policy would allow us to do things that we're not doing right now.
Right.
So the real question is, what are we going to do, given that we have this framework that gets reapproved perfunctorily every year? So I think we ought to talk about our investment priorities and goals as opposed to our investment policy per se. That's already here. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, Chuck, that, and it needs to start with looking at it, you know, what's in LAIF, and that can go into the finance committee meeting. But I mean, like I said, I think we can change the policy to meet our goals at some point. So I don't see any problem approving the policy tonight.
Yeah, we don't have to change the policy even.
Right,
We know
that's what I'm saying.
What's in LAIF is in the treasurer's report that we get every month.
I know, but I mean, I want to actually see their portfolio.
Is there a motion to approve?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the annual adoption of the district's investment policy and district treasurer approval for fiscal year 2021 and 22.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right. Any further discussion? Any public comment, Michelle?
Public that would like to provide public comment, please raise your hand or press *9 on your phone. And I see none.
All right, please call the vote.
Director Bernstein,
Aye.
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Corrali,
Aye.
Director Solano is absent, Director McLaughlin.
Aye. All right.
So
number-
before we leave this, so do you want to, Chuck, we can talk about that agenda item. If the board wants us to look at the portfolio, is that what the direction is from the board?
I'll put it on the agenda for discussion.
Okay, perfect. I just want to make sure that's the board's direction. Sounds like it is.
It is.
Well, I would like to, once it's on the agenda, bring it back to the board so we can.
Yeah.
Take it as a whole.
Yeah, for sure, Robert. It just needs to get on the finance committee's agenda first.
Sounds good.
All right, item 13, discuss the process for the selection of a management audit consultant. Chief Navarro.
Thank you, directors. We have a staff report before you. Previous to this discussion, we've actually issued the request for proposal for the management audit. It's been a number of months where it's gone back and forth. Thank you to Director Bernstein for doing some editing, and we have elicited that. we now have to talk about process. And what we recommend is that in the past, what staff has done, and we've run a number of RFPs, staff will put together the RFP, they'll develop deliverables, they'll take a look at the audience and who's available out there to do the work or do the consultation, and we send them out. When it comes back, there is a review process we typically go through. We do a scoring initially and select those individuals that we think are best meet the deliverables that we've asked for. We invite them in for an interview and a presentation. Staff will get together and discuss it. We'll select who we think is probably the best consultant or contractor, or whichever one direction we're going to go. Then we get into negotiation and contracting. What we're suggesting is that the several steps that I just discussed with you is that the review of the proposals themselves, staff has got a sheet that we will develop and we will score those. There actually is in the RFP a percentage on things that we'll be looking at. We can summarize all that information. Then the question is, where do we do after that? We believe that because the directors have been so actively involved, and literally this management audit is going to be an audit back to the directors, that in my estimation and staff's estimation, the directors will probably want to get involved in this. So tonight's discussion is about that level of involvement. Our recommendation is that once we have the summaries done, that's done by staff, that we make a presentation to whoever the directors decide will be part of that group, and have those individuals review the summary, have the discussion with us, have them decide which consultants are probably best suited in terms of deliverables. The second phase to that will have that same group of directors with staff support engage in interview process and listen to presentations. They can discuss who they think is the best applicant and do follow-up if they need to after that. They will make a selection, the directors themselves, on who they think is best qualified. Staff can then engage that consultant that's picked as best qualified in negotiations and develop a contract with the deliverables. And of course, the contract never gets awarded until it comes back to the directors. So what I'm asking tonight is that give us some guidance on the participation that the directors like to have. Quite frankly, we've done this with staff from pillar to post. We've done the whole process ourselves time and time again. And the only involvement that directors have had is when we come with the final contract and have that discussion with them. Sometimes we go to a committee and then to a full board. But because this management audit has really been a product or something that the board would like to do, we feel it's probably best that we come to you now and say, okay, what level of participation do you want? And so with that, I'll open it up for discussion and answer any questions you might have.
Chuck?
Since Rob isn't here, I'm going to speak for him about the what the Strategic Planning Committee has done, which is help develop this. It seems to me there's really three options here, and I don't know where I am in this, frankly, but there's three options. One would be for the board to decide to have the Finance Committee, excuse me, not the Strategic Planning Committee to look at this and review the proposals. The second would be for the board to nominate or ask the president of the board to create an ad hoc committee to review the proposals. And the third is for the whole board to do it. And those seem to me the three options that we have in terms of who's going to make the decision about whom to hire to do the management audit.
Robert, did I see your hand?
It's a clarification, Chief, regarding under the physical impact. in the first paragraph, it says the staff will not be able to cost out the project until competitive bids are received. And then in the following paragraph, sentence, it says funding for management audit has not been allocated in this year's budget. So we just don't have an idea of what that budget, what those costs may be on past experience.
I posed that question to several of the consultants, and they basically wanted to take a look at the RFP, depending on how comprehensive it is. And one of the things that you'll see if you look at the RFP is that we actually scaled it with several options. And it was one of the discussions we had before the Strategic Planning Committee. What we asked for is a fairly comprehensive audit of the entire district, basically on our management side of it, not so much on the operations side of it. That's a huge, huge undertaking. I've been subject to audits a number of times back in cities where I work. They usually will take one aspect of your organization. We ask for everything within that, but we also ask for options. Do we scale this? Do we do IT and facilities? Do we do finance? Do we, for every year, maybe the board will have an auditor on board to give them sort of a check and balance on what's going on. So bottom line to that is the one consultant said it could be upwards of $100,000. And I have no idea what it's going to come back. But that's what RFPs are about. We will know when they come back with either the entire comprehensive one shot does it or options, and we'll know what the dollars and cents are. We're not committed to any money right now.
Can I get one small follow-up, just point of clarification? Maybe this has happened, maybe it haven't. If it has happened, if there's open, I don't know what's in the RFP. Maybe it's already been passed around to the board members and I just forgot all about it. But I'm concerned the fact that the committee has been working on it and it worked with the chief and came up with this RFP with certain guidelines in it. And if it's been presented to the board, please forgive me. Again, I may not have been paying much attention to it, but I don't recall ever seeing any documentation regarding what that audit is going to look like.
Guys, I'm trying to encapsulate what the audit's going to look like. The language in there is that we're looking for effectiveness and efficiencies on what we do. And let me give you, in my estimation, an example. We have every year financial audit, and we score very highly in that. And quite frankly, our staff is really good about meeting all the professional guidelines in terms of accounting practices. The auditor was not going to necessarily look at that. They'll look at the internal process. So for example, today at my desk, I probably signed off on 20 or 25 invoices. So our internal processes, we've tracked those invoices really well. But the question is why are we signing off on 20, 25 invoices with an individual at my rank? And then how many of those I do on a regular basis? So they would look at a process, not necessarily that we do the accounting end of it, is how effective or efficient are we on being able to do that. So that is across the board, because every aspect will be a little bit different than that. We do facilities. Are we doing facilities as effectively and efficiently as we can? Is possibility that we have one contractor who's our facilities person, and that's the person that ends up doing most of the work and subcontracting that. A management audit will come in and take a look at those kinds of aspects to it. Give the board some direction on what they foresee. IT the same way. Are we as efficient as we can be in IT? Are we replicating things? Can we cut back? Can we do things better? Can we be more effective in what we're doing? I hope that answers, because each one of us is a little bit different.
As a point of clarification, are we talking, the standard of coverage and this management are they on similar path? And it seems like there's some overlapping there. Have that been explored? And maybe it's not. Maybe it's two different things going on examining the agency. But I've heard that somewhat come out of the standards of coverage in terms of that type of language. And so if the management audit is going to uncover the same type of, going down that same path, then isn't it a duplication there somewhere? And that's where that's what I'm concerned about. Maybe not concerned. It just seemed like this, we're unleashing a consultant to go down a path that it seemed like the standards of coverage have went down before, and the information is going to come back the same.
Let me
Could be. I don't know.
let me see if I can help you with this. Many times I've taught leadership, and I do it in the fire service. And if you ask someone to get a piece of equipment from a fire truck, and that person walks around the truck 3 or 4 times, opening up every compartment to find it, they effectively have done the job you've asked them. They've got that piece of equipment. The question is, they weren't effective. And so when you look at why they weren't effective, is because A, they weren't trained, there wasn't a proper inventory, there wasn't consistent. So managing that task, basically, we'll look at the components on what can make that effective job being more efficient, and therefore you can produce more work, quite frankly. So the management audit is not looking specifically at the task itself, looking at how efficiently are we doing that. And I think I've been through audits in the past, part of my organization, and I'll be frank with you. Many times with Director Bernstein will do is ask the same kind of question that a management audit would. Why are we doing this? And it's always healthy to question why you're doing something, how you're doing it, and what the outcome is. And that's what management, in my estimation, that's what the auditor should be doing. But again, you're going to have a full presentation by those individuals that should be doing this for a business. And you'll be able to ascertain from that if it's going in the direction that you would like them to go.
That's why I just wanted to comment. I agree with Chuck's assessment of the three paths before us. I think we if we could select one of those paths tonight, I think it would go a long way to getting this effort moved forward. Chuck?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond very directly to Robert's question about duplication with standards of cover. It's certainly conceivable that this management audit would duplicate something else we're doing with consultants. For example, the study of emergency services. But basically, the management audit has excluded all operations, like suppression operations. It doesn't duplicate standards of cover at all. Standards of cover really involves the location of our fire stations, the routes that people take to get from point A to point B, and those kinds of things. This wouldn't do that at all. It would look at all our kind of non-suppression operations. It would look at the finance department and how we're paying bills and what accounting system we're using and what our processes are. It would look at human resources and say, should we be doing some other things in terms of our hiring? Should we be buying our benefits differently? Whatever it might be, it would be looking at our the repair services we're doing and saying, do we need more mechanics? Should we farm out mechanics and not have any on staff? Is there a different way we could do it? But it wouldn't deal with standards of cover really involve response times and things like that. It wouldn't deal directly with response times or numbers of firefighters or numbers of apparatus or anything like that.
Right. And again, I'll just comment, I agree with you, Chuck's assessment. I think this is a very different effort than the standards of cover analysis that's done every few years. So that leaves us what,
So I have a question, Jim.
well, let me just finish. I think the question remains before us, how do we move the process, the selection process forward? Do we, create an ad hoc? Do we just refer to the strategic planning committee, or does the board take it up as a whole? Virginia?
Yeah, so I guess my question is, I mean, let's say we do this. How do y'all as a board see this information being used constructively for the staff, I guess? Or is it multi-purpose for the staff and even for board priorities, or what, I guess, what is it that we're trying to accomplish as a board with the information that we're getting from
Chuck,
this?
you want to respond to that, or?
Well, let me just say, I think the management audit is primarily being done at this point for the board of directors. I think it relates to how we organize ourselves, how the district is organized. Do we have a director of administrative services, or do we have individual heads? How many people report to the chief? Do we need a fleet services manager or something like that looks at all the vehicles we have and so forth? So I think the board really should have a thought about what kind of management structure do we need to get done the important things we have to do. It would also tell us whether we should be investing more in this, investing less in certain things, contracting for things as opposed to doing them in-house. Obviously, the staff would benefit from the information as well, but I think it's designed primarily for the board. And secondarily, there was a thought that when we hired a new chief, that the chief, this would give some sort of guidance to a new chief to see where kind of first priorities should be, what we should focus on first, what needed attention and what probably was okay for the time being.
And I would just like to add on to that. I mean, earlier this evening, we approved going into a contract with CalPERS to provide benefits that had been promised 30 years ago, but have been neglected. The contract was never executed for 30 years. How many other things like that are lurking under the waves? And I would look to a management audit to look at our internal processes. Was that a failure? Was that foreseeable? What measures could be put in place to prevent something like that from happening again? And again, also to identify, are there other issues like that lurking? So I think it would benefit, I think it helps us fulfill our fiduciary duties as a board. And then it would also help the staff. The staff wants to do excellent work. The staff wants to provide an excellent level of service. So this would help them achieve that goal as well. So that's what I would look to this effort to accomplish.
If I can, let me, if you go to the RFP and it is posted, There's a number of deliverables that are there. The language in that, I think answers some of your questions is, that, for example, is the district organizational structure is aligned and positions are appropriately staffed with clear delegation of duties and authorities. District policies ensure they support the organizational structure. It talks about overall efficiency, effectiveness, and performance of policies and procedures, and management oversight is in support of delegated functions and responsibilities. So it's looking at alignment, it's looking at relationships, it's looking to see how effective and efficient are those, or are there things that they can help with that, and asking those kinds of questions so that the board has got the information back to them and saying, as Director McLaughlin has directed, is there an issue here that we could give to the new fire chief to say, possibly this is a thing to look at. Clear lines of communications, is it aligned with our strategic plan, etc. So it's not trying to point a finger at any person or any particular division. What it's doing is, as a team, how effective and efficient are we? Are we siloed, or are we working comprehensively across the board? I think, quite frankly, we might be very pleased when this comes in and you take a good look at it to see, yeah, you're right. We could make this a little bit better. We can do this, we can do that.
Chuck?
Yeah, I just wanted to request, Manny, Robert brought up a good point that I think the directors may not have been aware that this was available online. Could you either send a link to all the directors for the RFP, or actually send them a PDF of it so that everyone had a chance to review it?
Absolutely. Yes, I can. We can make sure that gets out.
Thank you.
What I'll also include in that is the list of consultants that we've sent everything out to. And one of the things we did do is we got in some information from Director Solano on the special districts. They have actually a page on that. So we posted it for all special districts that are out there. So contractors can go and consultants can go to that special district and see it posted. So we're kind of interested to see what kind of report we'll get. Matrix, which has done work for us in the past, we also sent them an RFP.
So Chief Navarro, just to be clear, you're looking for direction tonight on the selection process. You know, how will that final, what is the selection process?
What I'd like to see is that, and the answer to the three questions that Director Bernstein brought up, is that the committee is going to do it? Is it going to be an ad hoc committee, or is it going to be the entire board? So that's the one question. Who is going to do this? So obviously the directors are going to be involved. Our recommendation is that the directors are involved. After we've summarized everything, we will make a presentation to them. We'll go through all the RFPs, give them our recommendations for discussion, but the directors will make the decision on who they want to pursue in terms of an interview and a presentation. The directors will also make a decision on who the consultant will be and who basically the best consultant. It will then be turned back to staff, and staff will go through the negotiations and develop a comprehensive contract. That contract will not be binding until it comes back to the board for full review. So that's kind of the steps. The directors, if you're going to get involved in it, whoever it is, they are part of the summary review that we've done by staff. They will make a selection on who they want to talk to and have a presentation. They will listen to that, and they will make the selection on who they think is the best consultant. At that point, if you want to go, they want to take it back to the full board, or it's up to them. But once you've decided who it is that you think should be the consultant, it gets handed back to us. We'll take it to legal. We'll do all this stuff. We'll bring it back to you as a package.
Okay, in listening to you, it occurs to me there's really a fourth option, and that would be to just delegate this to staff the
The
selection.
other option is you can delegate the entire thing to staff, and then you'll see at the end, we make the presentation with, and normally we'd bring the consultant in too. If we're gonna ask for a contract, we'd have the consultant come in. But I'll give you my personal opinion is, I think this is an auditor that should be directly talking to the board members. And you should be heavily involved in this, because basically that's the oversight that we'll be looking at. And this is the information you can give to any chief or any new chief that's coming in saying, here's some issues. And I'll be frank with you, I've been in this business a long time. There have been issues. There's been, transparency issues and other kinds of things, communication issues. Someone, coming in from fresh eyes, I think can really be helpful for us.
Yeah, thank you for that. I would propose that, I think just in terms of efficiency to launch this would be to create an ad hoc committee that would work with staff to make that final selection. And I don't know if that resonates with any of my fellow directors, or if there's any other thoughts on the best way to proceed.
Well, I think, if I may, I think that it really needs to be full board participation. Like I say, I may be the only duck this side of the water, but because there was a body of document put together for guiding the consultants into looking into the interior of this particular organization, and without the benefits of everyone having an input into those instructions, I'm feeling kind of left out in the left field, having to now go and online and look for this document and to try to analyze it to see if does it have the things that make sense. If I was going into evaluating an organization, maybe it does, maybe it didn't, it doesn't. So I mean, that's part of, from where I come from, that you want to bring people along, you got to include them. When you start excluding them or selectively bringing them into the picture when it's appropriate, like now, there's a lot of apprehension on my part as to what real values this document is going to really bring forth. Maybe it might tell us how to tighten up a screw somewhere, but what is the overall end goal for this? And so that's just my personal opinion. I'm just not as enthusiastic around it. I was excited about it at one point about, well, maybe, yeah, the district probably needed to check the nuts, the bolts from inside, outside to see how it works. Because I understand efficiencies. I understand how, time management makes a difference, motion, how things are done, whether you get more efficiency. I understand that, that part of work and getting things done. But the part of the issue is that, it's hard for me to get excited when my toe has only been exposed to the water. So I'm trying to get through that for the sake of the commitment had already been made to go down this road. I'm just trying to get excited and try to understand what.
Robert, do you have a process in mind if staff were to go through the RFP process and develop a list of potential contractors and bring them to the board?
Well, I think it's all like you sign a contract, you want to know what's in the contract. You want to know at least what's in the contract, so that even though you may not like the whole contract, at least you know what's in the contract. You can talk intelligently about the contract and what the outcomes that we're looking for. Right now, I have no perspective on that at all. And that could be my fault for not squeezing somebody and squeezing it out of them. But I shouldn't have to go through that type of process. So, and I don't want to bring up a past experience, but recently we just went through an experience. We wasn't quite all clear on what our end goals are. So hopefully we can get our end goals, unite behind that, so that we can all know what we're looking at when the report comes. So to answer your question, Jim, I don't know.
I mean, just to be clear, to give me some clarity, Robert, would you like to go back into the RFP and be involved in the development of those items to be evaluated?
I don't want to slow up the process. I really don't. I just need to have the committee to be a little bit more responsible and bring in stuff back to the board in increments of what their thought process is and what they'd like for us to buy into as a whole, as a board. Because if not, then we have these kind of impasses like this. And that's what, that's what slows everything up, and that's what's costing us more money in the long run. And I'm not into doing that. I would just like to be in the committees, and not just one committee. All the committees need to do this. Not spring something up in the ninth hour and say, hey, this is what we're gonna do, and we're going at it. And now you want my buy-in. Maybe I'm the only lone wolf in this regard, but that's what I need, into the inclusivity at the onset and ongoing. So to me, I'm just gonna have to read up on what I need to read up and try to understand it. That's all. And if I have some objection to it, I just have some objection to it. But I'm not trying to stop the wheel. It's just process oriented. That's, I am. You should know me by now. It's about process. So that's it.
Chuck, Virginia, do you have, where would you like to see this go?
Well, I have a thought, but I could almost go anyway, but I think, let me separate it into two parts for a moment. One is the selection of a vendor. I think it would be relatively easy to involve all 5 board members. Board members would get copies of the proposals, read them, use the evaluation form that Manny is setting up to evaluate them. And then we could have that as a component of a meeting where we simply discussed it, take a vote, and we would select a contractor in that way. I think though, on an ongoing basis, in terms of getting progress reports, I think it would be better to have the progress reports go to the Strategic Planning Committee, because that committee meets on a regular schedule. They have a regular agenda. We wouldn't have to find special times to meet or anything. But that then in the report that's made to the board meeting every week, it would be incumbent upon the chairperson of the Strategic Planning Committee to give an update of what progress has been made, what's going on, what's being worked on, and so forth. So I think I would see it kind of the Strategic Planning Committee being the one that's actually the liaison to the contractor, but the selection of the contractor being done by all 5 board members. That would be my suggestion.
All right. Virginia, any thoughts on this, in that vein?
I guess when I asked the question about, what it is that we were trying to accomplish, and I heard some of the answers from, both you and Chuck, it seems to be that what we're trying to accomplish has not even, I guess, been decided on. And there are lots of things that lots of people want to do, different things. And I heard Chuck say that he, wanted to look at the possibility of, what would it look like if the fire district changed its management structure? I mean, is that something that we even want to spend our time on, right? I mean, it's like at some point, or it's something else. I mean, it could be anything. At some point, you can continue to have this long wish list or things that you want to do, and really not accomplish anything, and yet waste a lot of money doing something like this. So, I mean, I know it, I get that we want to do this search and, and everything, but I'm kind of in the same camp as Robert a little bit in terms of kind of being brought along without just, throwing things at different shiny objects to see if, we can hit them or, whatever. And I don't know. I just feel like when we're not focused, we're going to be wasting our time. And maybe what y'all are trying to do is get the committee together, or an ad hoc committee, or whatever, strategic planning committee together to focus us. I mean, I don't know. I mean, if you're talking about, Chuck, that all 5 of us should be on board to a certain extent, does that mean on board to focus us on what we want to get out of this management audit? I mean, it just seems like it's all over the place. And maybe it's just me that I'm thinking that, I'm hearing all these different things and I'm not understanding what y'all are trying to accomplish as your end goal. So I don't know what the process should be like, Jim, but I do think that we need to, as a board, figure out what we want to do. Because I'm not sure that I want this structure to change to a management. We've had this discussion for years. Management structure where there's an administrator on the top, like a city manager structure, fire chief, fire marshal, et cetera, underneath that. I mean, if that's the end goal, I'm not sure that I want that. And so that's the discussion maybe we should have. That's what I heard Chuck say, but I mean, I could be wrong. So I just don't want us to be all over the place where we accomplish nothing. And like I said, and waste a lot of time and money.
Chuck, before you respond, listening to the discussion, I think there has been an RFP developed with a scope of work, and I think it might benefit all of us to review that, take a look at it. We could provide feedback to the strategic planning committee where it originated, and perhaps be in a better position to consider this item at our next meeting after we've all had a chance to review that RFP and provide input. So I just throw that out for consideration. Chuck?
Yeah, I just want to say, Virginia, you entertained the possibility that you might be wrong about what I thought, and I just want to emphasize that you are wrong about what I meant. I didn't say anything about the top management of the organization. The fact is we have changed organizational structures. At one point, we had an administrative manager who was in charge of all the non-suppression stuff. Other times we've had different people reporting to the chief. We've had a variety of different structures. And so I'm not arguing for any kind of a structure at this point, and certainly not what you're talking about. I mean, I've certainly talked about that long ago and in the past, but not recently. So that's just not on the table right now. I think maybe we probably can't go any further than we've gone now. We were just trying to figure out who should decide. It seems like maybe we can't decide this. And when we voted on this before, we had 2 people who were against this, Virginia and Robert, and then there were 3 people who were for it. So Rob has left the meeting, and I don't think we're revisiting the fact. The fact is that the RFP has gone out. So maybe we need the whole full 5-member board to be here to decide the next steps at this point, because throwing up and saying, well, I don't know what it means, it all seems so confusing, it's just muddying the waters, and there's no reason for that. There is an RFP, read the RFP. If you think the RFP is bad, fine, say so. But until you are, making comments that are based on no information, I think is unwise. And I mean, I could see it anyway. I could see any kind of a process. We need a process, but the fact is the proposals aren't due for a while. We can wait till the next meeting to decide how we're going to review them. And we probably ought to just do that.
Jim, I want to say this and let it go. I'm a little appalled a little bit by that final comment, Chuck, and don't take it personally. It's not, I take this job that I have signed on to as a director very seriously. And when there's gaps of information, I'm not calling it willful. I'm not calling it, that intentional. I'm just saying when there's gaps of information, understanding of a clear process to the end goal, it makes me concerned. I don't like coming spinning my wheels like the next fella or woman, and I think we know better, but we're not putting ourselves in a position to try to bring folks along, and I'm trying to get behind this, but when I feel as though that there's I'm not calling it intentional when I'm saying that when you get charged up and want to do something, you charge up and want to do it, and you just the damn torpedoes and full steam ahead. And I'm just saying, I don't want to be a casualty of the war, of the mishap. I don't want to spend no more than on taxpayer dollars than we have to. I don't want to be redundant in our reporting and what we're looking at to try to make our system function that much better. We can do this in an organized way, but we got to be able to step back and try to at least come one step towards the other fellow, so that they can understand what you're doing. Right now, I don't know what you're doing, what you're trying to do. And I'm not saying just you, I'm just saying the process you got that is set up is going down that road. And then the appearance is that there's only one person, one committee deciding what the whole board is to look at and approve and decide upon. And that's part of what, my reason for voting for it down when we started talking about this. But because it was outgunned and outvoted, that it went through. And I'm just saying, okay, I don't accept that. We're going to spend the money, but at least give a clear roadmap on what you're looking at and where you're going down, what rabbit hole you're going down. So that we can then kind of help you if you want our opinion about certain things. But if you don't want an opinion, just keep it close to your chest and go from there. And it's nothing personal, so don't take it personal. I'm just giving you my opinion where I see where I am as one body on this ship. That's all.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, I just wonder, son, I mean, I can understand you having that feeling, Robert, but I just proposed that all 5 board members participate in the decision. I don't know how to be more inclusive than to say, let's have everybody be involved.
You know what one person told me once, Chuck, when he thought he had me on the ground, he was much bigger than I was, trying to knock my teeth out. He told me it's not, don't take this personally. And when my teeth get knocked out, but I regroup. I mustered enough energy to get him on the ground, flip the switch. And so what I'm saying is that you're talking about now, but what about yesterday? What about the feelings and the intent and the actions yesterday? And today is totally different. I'm just launching my feeling. If you had we had had this yesterday, I would have launched the same one. So it's a process, it's an intent in trying to include folks. That's all. I just want to be included. That's all.
Jim?
Virginia?
Yeah, thank you. So Chuck, the fact that I'd heard something differently from what you said tonight versus what you have been saying over the last few years, probably, again, don't take this personally because it's not. Maybe that's the lack of clarity that I think this process has had. And yes, I did vote against this the first time. And I, kind of still stick with what I said, and I can understand why, for me, it's like, I understand what you were saying, that you want everyone included, both of y'all, you and Jim, and I get it, and I do appreciate that. But that also means that, tonight, we don't have the votes necessarily for one thing or another. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but, you might want to stall it out to get the third vote, because the third vote isn't here. And so this is an opportunity for us to be inclusive, because we don't have the third vote. And that's what I think Robert is saying. I don't want to put words into Robert's mouth, but that's how I'm feeling, because it was a very close vote, 3-2. And now right now, we have 4 people. So how can we use this opportunity without the third vote, which we'd be outnumbered, to be more inclusive and to have clarity? Yeah, maybe I didn't interpret what you were saying correctly, but I interpreted the totality of what you have said over the years. And the fact that Jim wants this management audit thing, I mean, for different purposes. I think what Robert is saying is, let's bring everyone along. And right now, given where we are right now with 4 people here, we can do that. And I mean, and maybe we don't have to vote on any of this tonight. And, we have more of a discussion, but I do think that if y'all think that this management audit is that important, then truly include all 5 of us and not a 3-2 vote.
Chuck?
Yeah, well, I'll follow your lead here, Virginia. I would like to make a motion that all 5 directors be involved in reviewing the proposals, ranking them, and selecting them.
I'll second that. Because it is that important to me. I think it's very important for the organization, for the institution, that this management audit occur. And I think the sooner we get started, we're in a time of transition. We have 2 key vacancies right now, and I think that creates an imperative to get this underway so that we can have the benefit of the results.
Okay, so quick question. That we'd all be involved, Chuck, but would you want unanimous votes on everything then, if you really want to be inclusive, or is this a 3-2 vote again for future votes?
I'm only focusing on the motion of how we select the contractor.
I understand. Okay, but I'm just asking what okay, that's fine. So basically, because it was a divided vote in the first place, you just don't care if it's divided or unanimous for future votes, if it's that important to you that all 5 of us have a say in this. That's what it sounds like to me.
I'd like to move this, along. So I mean, it's been moved and seconded. If there's any discussion on Chuck's, motion, if we get that out of the way and move on to a vote. Michelle, is it, Robert, did you?
Yeah, I'm all for, the board members, looking at it and have a say so in who to audit. I think it should be that way. I hopefully in the process of and I'll vote for it, because it's not what today was just supposed to be discussed, the process for the selection of a management audit consultant. So that is part of the process, is that the board members, all the board members vote on that. And I'm just saying, in the future, we gotta, as Virginia said, we gotta really get inclusive. We just gotta reach out a little bit more. That's all. And the committee's gotta work as the committee should work. The information has to come back to the board at some point, before a decision is made, before any action is made, to make sure that what the board thinks is important to have into our consultant or whatever, there has to be a sounding board there. Because, you know, if you had brought this last month, I would have told you the same thing. You know, where's the information? Yeah, why would we make decisions? So anyway, that's enough commentary. So I'm ready to vote on it.
Okay, just,
Well, I just want to thank Chuck. Chuck, I think I'm understanding where you're coming from, and I do appreciate that you're trying to be inclusive. So thanks.
Chuck, just for sake of clarity, if you could repeat your motion.
Yes, I made a motion that the all 5 board members be included in the process of reviewing the proposals and the selection of the ultimate of the contractor.
Okay, thank you. Michelle, is there any public comment on this issue?
Would the public please raise your hand or hit *9 on your phone? And I see no public comments.
Okay, would you call the vote, please?
Director Bernstein,
Aye.
Director Jones,
I,
Director Crowley,
I
Director Solano is absent, Director McLaughlin.
Aye. All right. That brings us to our last item, informational report on COVID-19 policies and presumption for firefighters. Chief Navarro, I'll hand that off to you.
This has been before committee, and there was a discussion at the committee level, and I'm going to paraphrase, is that a great deal of detail was asked about where we are with that. I'll be very open with you that our EMS manager and our former Deputy Chief Stevens and now Chief Schaefer have been very diligent. Our organization has postured themselves in a position we're very careful about our exposures and what has happened and what has occurred relative to that. And so consequently, we haven't had the exposures that other fire departments have had. And I speak with some confidence. My son is a firefighter back in Colorado Springs, and I have good friends still in Oakland. We've done everything we needed to do to be as diligent as possible. Do we still have some people that are not vaccinated? Are we still trying to manage that? Yes. But what the consensus was in the group, that the committee that talked about it, is what is everyone else doing? What position have they taken? Has CDC come out with, you know, we're going to do this? Has OSHA taken a position yet? If OSHA comes out and says occupationally is what you're going to do, then we'll react to that. But at this point, we're just going to hesitate and wait to see what's going to happen. I think that pretty much paraphrases what I heard during that committee.
So the committee was the HR committee?
yes,
Right? And
I was
you acted in
part
my
of that.
stead.
Yeah.
Right? I think you acted in my absence, didn't you, Virginia?
Yeah, and I think that Manny was, Manny, you did a good summary of what happened. Because Rob led the committee on that, and so we're just kind of waiting and seeing.
So was there a recommendation from the committee, Virginia?
Basically what Manny just said, just kind of we're waiting and seeing. There was not a recommendation to go one way or the other, to, you know, to require vaccines or not.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Chief Navarro or Virginia, or discussion? Chuck?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, it looks like Melanie actually prepared the staff report. I wanted to ask about page 3 of 4 on it. I had a question there because I wasn't sure what the conclusion is. This is on page 99 of our packet, or page 3 of 4. Is Melanie still on the call?
I see her name. There she is.
Good evening, directors. I am still on the phone, on the call.
Could I ask you, at the bottom of the page 3 of 4, you have a statement here about AMR, and you said GMR has advised employees that they fit into 3 categories: healthcare organizations, large employers, and federal contractors. it's my understanding that in all three cases, vaccinations are required, but you didn't mention what AMR is doing.
At this time, and I was told this by an AMR supervisor, that they are waiting to see what the federal mandates will be. They're being told that there will most likely be vaccine mandates for them, but they are waiting for the federal government to come forth with more policies and rules, as those are not effective at this time.
Okay, and then let me just make a statement to you while you're here. I appreciated the updating you had done to this. I believe it was updated recently. In other words, you added some things at the end that weren't there the first time you wrote on this. And it gives a more complete picture now of what's happening. And I think we've all been reading about this, that Stanford is requiring of all employees, Kaiser is requiring it of all employees, Sequoia is requiring it of all employees. And I'll tell you, I can't be more disappointed in the district that has prided itself on being a leader. I mean, we never said drones. We'll wait to see when fire departments are required to have drones before we get a drone. We've always wanted to be a leader in this. And, I'm elected by the residents of our district. And it seems to me that if they were to vote on this almost overwhelmingly, they would want the people who come out and are in close contact with them in an emergency situation, they would want them to be vaccinated. And they would not go along with the idea of waiting to see what somebody else does about this. I mean, when it serves them, our employees want to be viewed as healthcare workers. But when it comes to, the mandate, oh my goodness, we're treading on their individual liberties. But what about the 80-year-old person, 90-year-old person who has some sort of a cardiac event, who is in frail health to start with, who may have some sort of health issues? We're not giving them a choice about whether they can be treated by someone who has the odds, not the certainty, but the odds of being have less odds of being infected with COVID at the time they're being treated. I think it's unconscionable that we have not acted as a leader in this perhaps 2 or 3 months ago. And I think we need to move forward with this right now without waiting for anybody to make a mandate. And I actually commend, in general, our workforce for being 80%. I just read the study about the highway patrol that is only 52% vaccinated, which is horrible. It's like the worst of any kind of profession. And we're helping professions. I mean, it just is unconscionable that we subject, without their say-so, subject our residents to this additional risk by the 20%. And I assume that some of that 20% may even be paramedics, which makes it even worse. So I would like to see us, and I will at the next meeting propose a resolution that it does become mandated, and that we can draw up rules to protect those people that have some sort of health issue or a legitimate religious issue. But I just don't think we can go really another month. We will have to, but I just don't think we should go any further without having our force vaccinated fully.
Melanie, a question for you. Has the county health officer taken a position on this issue?
I've not spoken to the county health officer. However, I have spoken to the director of the EMS agency, And their position is that they are not going to take a position on this. They're not going to put a policy out pertaining to vaccine mandates. This is going to be agency dependent or organization dependent.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further comments or questions for Melanie?
I have just one more thing I want to say. That. Yeah, I just want to say that one of the benefits, I mean, there's the risk of infection, and I think that's well documented. But the other issue is the issue of quarantine. Anybody who's vaccinated is not required to quarantine. But, and I'm not, the vocabulary, if you actually have COVID, they talk about isolation. Quarantine is when you're exposed to it. So you have come in contact, close contact with somebody who has it. Anybody who's not been vaccinated has to quarantine. And the district has had the policy, which I think it should no longer have, of paying people to quarantine. But people who are vaccinated don't have to quarantine. Well, quarantining, now it's only 10 days, but still, we're talking about 10 days. That's probably 2 full shifts for an employee where we're having to pay overtime to some other employee to take their place because they're not vaccinated. If they were vaccinated, they would not have to quarantine. And this is an extra expense, not only an extra risk, but an extra expense to the district. It's also, just for the sake of our employees, these people are living in the same house, they're eating. That is no masks on, right next to people who are not vaccinated. I think it's a terrible risk for our firefighters that they're being exposed to unvaccinated people in a close environment, and that they could be taking an infection back home with them and infecting the families of the firefighters. It hurts our readiness, it hurts our finances. I just think it cannot continue further.
Right, well, this appears as an informational item for this meeting, and Chuck, you and I will participate in the agenda setting meeting for next month, and you've said you want to take it further, so we'll address it then. If there's nothing further on this item. Michelle, is there any public comment?
If that would like to provide public comment, please raise your hand now or click *9 on your phone. And I do not see any public comments.
Okay, thank you. Our last item is the discussion of the December board meeting dates. Was there a proposal to shift the dates? I'm not aware of one.
Yeah, I can't remember what we were talking. Oh, I think it was with regard to just a timeline for the holidays, Jim. So I'm just trying to look and see. Let me see. Our normal meeting in December would be the 21st. And usually, or in the past, just kind of moved it up by a week to the 14th, and just so that it's not so close to the holidays like Christmas and other holiday celebrations. So I think that may be the reason that that's here. So I don't know if you'd like me to make a motion to move it up, or I mean, we can do it by consensus. To move the date up for our December meeting to the 14th. I'm happy to make that motion, or if the board here says they're happy to do that, then we can just do it by consensus.
I'll just say I have no objection. I don't, Chuck, Robert, I don't know how you feel about it.
So would that mean that all the committee meetings would be suspended? Just on that Tuesday?
Well, they would be the preceding Tuesday, the 7th, right?
Yeah, but I guess we could have the committee meetings on, I don't know, I don't want to burden the staff, but I mean, we could have it on the Tuesday, the 30th of November if we needed to. But again, I don't want to burden the staff, but I know it's like a week before the normal first Tuesday is a week before this proposed date for the December meeting.
I think it would have an impact on staff one way or the other. If we left it on the 7th, then, they'd only have that
Like
week
3
to prepare
days.
for the 14th.
I think we have to have the committee meetings, so I don't think we can suspend them. There's just too much going on.
No, I agree. I would leave that alone. I'd leave the committee dates alone if we want to move it to the meeting date to the 14th. Perhaps, Michelle, would that have an especially adverse impact on you?
My only concern is the turnaround time, because the committee meetings are on the 7th and then the packet goes out 2 days later on the 9th. So if everybody's on the ball, it will be tight.
I
And
mean,
it depends on what's on the committee agenda. So we'll have to see, and we'll make it happen if we have to.
Could I ask a
It'll be
question? Michelle, would it be better to have the committee meetings a week earlier?
or even like that Thursday, December 2nd, or Wednesday. I mean, yeah, are you talking about a week earlier during the week, Chuck, or are you talking about the date that I threw out of November 30th?
Isn't that a week earlier?
Yeah, but I mean, it could be December 1st or 2nd too.
It doesn't have to be a Tuesday, is your point.
Right, is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Well, I was asking Michelle, which was better, but I'm okay with having the meeting on December 21. I mean, I don't really care one way or the other.
The 7th, keeping the 7th would be fine. We'll make it happen.
Robert, where are you on this?
I'm okay with the 21st, because I'm not going to be, I'm still going to be in town, so.
You make a point. I know I'll be in town, and with Zoom, it makes meeting attendance a little easier.
I mean, it depends on how heavy the agenda is. We got a light agenda, because, we always have light agendas during that period of time. So it just depends on people preference, but I'll be here. I just, I hate to have staff to kind of have this extra burden that having to turn around packets in 2 days. And again, it depends on how thick the agenda is. If it's only 1 or 2 items, and hey, we drink eggnog the rest of the time, but if not, it's be a meeting like tonight,
Well, I think I want to just circle back with Chief Schaefer, because we were talking about this vis-a-vis the chief search. So, I mean, he had also suggested moving it up to December 14th, if I remember correctly. But he's not here tonight, so.
I'm gonna miss that.
I mean, we could look at this next month. I want to get his input on this, because if I remember correctly, he was the one who suggested it
Okay.
as
mean,
a possibility.
I don't think we lose anything if we push.
Yeah, I don't either. And I
Okay.
think it's good to hear what his thoughts are.
Okay, hey, we'll table it till then. All right. All right, that brings us to reports and requests. Committee reports, I know we've talked about them a lot this evening. I'm not sure there's anything else to add. So I'll start with you, Chuck, and finance and strategic planning.
We covered everything that was on the finance committee agenda, and the only thing on the strategic planning agenda was the management audit update. So we've covered everything in both those committees.
Okay. Virginia, EPREP.
We just had our normal updates. And I think that they may have talked about this earlier, Constant Associates, I think, if they did, I'm sorry, I'll just do a reminder, they're gonna need extra time to finish their report, so that was pretty much that update.
Okay, anything else from HR?
No, just what we talked about was only the one item on the vaccinations.
All right.
Could you,
Liaison.
could I ask just specifically, when is the report due now? I know that Chief, in your absence, Jim, the chief talked to me and mentioned that he was going to give them the extra month. And, I said, well, if they're not done, they're not done. And an extra month, what else, what choice do you have? But I don't remember when it's due now. Do you remember, Virginia?
I thought if I remember correctly, Ryan brought it up that it would probably be another 30 to 60 days out.
It was only 30 days, I know, but I just didn't know when it's 30 days from.
I thought it was at the end of October.
Okay, so it'll be at the end of November. Okay.
Yeah, I think, Chuck, but I mean, I don't know. I thought he said 30 days, but then it's like, well, I mean, that's what they're trying to adhere to. So let's just keep it at that. I'm hoping they're going to have it done by then.
All right, liaison reports. Anything? All right.
I have nothing.
Reports and requests of directors. Anything?
No.
I have nothing.
I have not.
Okay. President's report. I think at the last meeting, I talked about an public art installation, proposal for Station 4. Chuck and I and Mr. Jim Lewis met this morning with a representative from the National Endowment for the Arts just to get information on their grant application process. This is still very much in the formative stage. I will, report. I think I'll put it on the agenda for next month and just see where the board is at on this. I don't want to get it out in front of the board on this item. I needed to gather enough information to be able to discuss it and present it in some kind of coherent fashion. So I feel like I'll be able to do that at the next meeting. And again, just take the temperature of the board. Is this something that the board is interested in? Is there enough interest to pursue it? And I'll again have enough information to kind of flesh it out for you and give a more meaningful presentation.
Oh, Jim, yeah, I forgot. I don't know if you got an update on the ad hoc committee. If you had a chance to talk to Francine, and
I have not.
If Francine is online, kind of give a quick update, because it seemed like things are revving up really good. I think we had a good meeting. And I know that Francine sent out information to all the board members about the questions that wanted to be asked. And Francine, are you there still?
There she is. Could you give us a brief update on where we're at, Francine?
Yeah, so I think, let me just shut the door just 1 second.
Sure.
Oh, put out a bit. No.
We're moving along.
Francine, your audio is intermittent.
Laptop.
There we go.
I'll try to talk louder. Sorry. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So the position closes this Friday. The applications are coming in. I reserved the hotel for the 2 days.
I'm sorry, Francine, you're breaking up.
To do. Can you hear me?
We can now, yes.
So I sent, the room is reserved. We're moving right along schedule. I have sent the board the questions for the interview panel and an idea for day 2, and kind of a written assessment center to get feedback. So if you could please let me know if you have any feedback on the questions or the assessment center for day 2. But yeah, we're moving right along. Everything is, we're on the schedule. Next week, we'll be reviewing the questions on Tuesday. And then I'll be.
All right. Thank you for that. Any questions for Francine? Or-
Maybe if she could give a hand sign, I was curious to know approximately how many we've received to date.
So, you know, like I knew kind of going into this, we weren't going to get the number of applications that Terry had. Obviously, we're the second time around. So far, as of today, I believe we have 15. I think there may be a couple more coming in. I reached out to a couple people that have, you know, probably going to put their application in. So I'm hoping we. That would be a nice kind of number. I think 34. But yeah, so I think good. You know, I think we'll have some good selection. So we'll look at those next week.
Very good. Thank you, Francine.
Thanks.
All right. Yeah, thank you for that, Robert.
Oh, yeah.
That'll be occupy a lot of our time in the next few weeks. So I look forward to working with all of you on it. Michelle, is there any public comment?
Yeah, wishes to provide public comment, please raise your hand or hit star 9. I think we only have one member, so I don't see any hands. So we have no public comment.
All right, well, thank you. All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
Move.
Second,
Michelle, would you call the vote, please?
Director Bernstein,
Aye.
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Crowley,
aye.
Foreman is absent, and Director McLaughlin.
Aye. All right, good night, everyone.
Night.
All right.
Sleep tight.